Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Such a joy. He's been teaching us so much out of this chapter 2, Mishnah 6. We've been at it. Today we got a finale for that Mishnah, part 17. Rabbi Coffman assures me he thinks we'll be done for sure today. I'm sure he is confident there's something I need to pick up here, and I'm trying to understand. I've even reviewed several of these messages just to make sure I'm not missing anything. But I mean, we're just following the rabbinical guidance, and I am just so thankful that Rabbi Coffman takes the time out of his now busier schedule to share with us, and it's always a joy. Rabbi Coffman, you're live on the air. Tell us how things are going with your new project, plus the class is yours, sir.
Pleasure always to be here, and I'm not sure there's not going to be a part 18. We'll see. You just never know. I get started, even though you're going to give me more time tonight. You just never know what may or may not come out of my mouth. So yeah, started going up north last week, Monday and Wednesday, twice a week. Got to see the terrain. Nice. Met some people up there. Got taken around. Saw the sheep. Saw horses, saw goats, it's like, I don't know, it could be my, my inner self really coming out. I got to put on my cowboy hat now. You never know. But we started a class on Wednesday, starting with the laws of damages, really to actually about what makes a rabbinic court judge. There are a number of things in the Code of Jewish Law speak about that. I don't know. They wanted to pick the hardest thing to learn, so we'll see. We'll see where it goes. I had about half a dozen people there. Going to meet some more families when I go up. This week. So,
well, I hope they appreciate you as much as we do.
No, so they had a good time. I told a lot of stories. I didn't, get any negative feedback, so that's also good. But whatever, they know, they see my face up there, and getting to know people. So we'll see. We'll see where it all. Where it all goes, as we mentioned last week, there's a short-term project, definitely a much bigger long-term project. We'll see where that goes in the next, in the next number of weeks. Hopefully, maybe I have some sort of answer before Rosh Hashanah. We'll see. See if anything makes headway that way. But, we're planning to make it grow. And the most important thing, as I told them up there, is that if the class is good, people will come. And one of the things they said was, well, you're going to remind people, you got to this, okay. But if the class is good, people should, they'll make the time to come. So we'll see. Even if numbers dip or they go up or, whatever, there are a number of people who actually wanted to come, couldn't make it on Wednesday. But, nonetheless, hopefully we'll get them there. We'll speak, I'm going to speak to people, and as we said, we'll see where it all goes, but this is just...
Well, we pray wind in your sails and
folks it's just a bigger, it's the beginning of a bigger, certainly a much bigger project, which certainly limits my time and other things. Nonetheless, it's a lot of fun. It's, I'm having a great time meeting people there, awesome. Speaking to people there, and, it's something that's needed, so I'm going to put our best foot forward. So the last part of this Mishnah, as we spoke about last week, was that in a place where there are no leaders, you got to strive to be a leader. Right now, we mentioned that being a leader means 100% you absolutely have to know what you're doing. Right? Being a leader, you can't just wing it, so to speak. But let's say there's no one to step up. If there's no one to step up, then even if you're not the greatest Torah scholar in the world, doesn't matter, right? If there's no one else to do it, then you have to step up over here. So, it doesn't make it easy, but obviously you need proper rabbinic guidance. Can't just, I mentioned, you wing it. You can't just wing it over here. You have to have guidance, right? But if there's no one, we mentioned by Pinchas, right, quote unquote, the vigilante, right, who shish kebabs, Zimri and Cosby Batsur, right? Zimri, the head of a tribe, etc. And he kills them. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't remember what the law was, what the halacha was, and God says, you assuage my anger, right? Because he shish kebab them, he killed them, right? So over here, Pinchas stood up. No one else stood up. Pinchas says, I'm going to stand up. He could have been killed, and if he would have been killed, then Zimri would have had no charges against him because he had the status of a pursuer.
Right.
A pursuer you kill, right? If you can stop them, you definitely kill them. I mean, you don't necessarily have to, but you do whatever it takes to stop them. So there are many miracles, Talmud says. Many, many miracles of what happened, and how he was saved. So that being the case, he stood up, right? He could have been killed, but sometimes you have to know where to stand up, but you need guidance, right? You certainly need guidance as well. Now,
oh, yeah. If not, we're doing it on our own too much.
Right. So that's why people say that, Pinchas, God forbid, looks like a vigilante, right? Because he acted on his own. Right? I have a video on that on YouTube about in Parshas Pinchas. Was he a vigilante or not? Obviously not. But it had to be done for the sake of heaven. Even when a person protests, and he speaks out against others, by the case of Pinchas, it's just an interesting case because had he not done it for the sake of heaven, then he's liable, right? Something like that, you cannot do it with any smidgen, right? I made up that word. Any smidgen, of hatred, for Cosby Batsur or for Zimri, any level of hatred, you wouldn't be allowed to do it, right? No possible way he's allowed to do it over here. So, it has to be done for the sake of heaven. So someone who's going to be a leader, obviously, no one's necessarily interested in being a leader if they know everyone's going to dump on them when they don't like the decisions, that they make. Like, as my Rebbe would say, if a rabbi is a rabbi of a synagogue and the majority of people in the synagogue are not trying to drive you out of town, you're not doing your job right. Your job is to tell them what they need to hear, right? Regardless if they don't think they need to hear it or not, right? You have to know when to give rebuke, etc. But you got to tell them the way it is, right? So thank God in my position, I don't have a board of directors, I have to listen to, etc. So I have to listen to God and my Rebbe, in that order, but you have to do things on the up and up. You can't do it because, I want to be the leader. I want to do this. If you're qualified to do it, you have proper guidance. It's one thing, right? But if a person just does it, we mentioned before that if no one else is doing it, okay. So then a person jumps in. But if you don't necessarily know what you're doing, nonetheless, you're still needed. You need that guidance, right?
Yeah.
You absolutely
the potential
need that
for harm is too great, right?
No, that's for sure. So a person has to know also when to lead and to show others, right? Show others as well. In other words, not everyone has that capability. Some are, let's say, born leaders. Others they may have to train, etc. They may have to come out of their comfort zone, so to speak. There are people, in positions where they never thought in a million years, that's what they would be doing. But nonetheless, because of other things, this is what they ended up doing. Now, again, some people sort of have to be trained. And if you're not a people person, very hard, very, very hard to be, to be a leader because they'll be all over you. All right. So, even if you have to fake it to a certain extent, people you don't necessarily want to speak to. All right. That's what a person has to do. All right. You have to be able to juggle a lot of different hats. Right. It's what, essentially what a rabbi of a synagogue does. There are elements that, let's say, are more liberal. There are elements more hawkish, elements more political. But you have to put everyone together. You put them in one place. That's not such an easy thing to do because we are not necessarily uniform. We make up, many different aspects of the Jewish people. You have Sephardic people, you have Hasidic people, you have Lithuanians, right? Yeshivish people, you have more modern, less modern, more political, this, that. It's, keeping everyone in line, keeping everyone together is a hard thing, right? Certainly, it's certainly not an easy thing, but what's the common denominator? Common denominator is Torah, right? That is what's going to unite, regardless of everything else. Now, so a person has to know when to lead, and let's say a person loves to learn, right? So as a leader, they also have to learn, but sometimes, even in the middle of learning, comes an emergency or something else, you got to shut the Gemara, put it aside, whatever you're learning, and you got to stand up when breaches in the laws of Torah are made. So we may have to protest, to make sure God knows that there are people that care about his Torah. They're willing to stand up even if nothing will come out of it. So my Rebbe's done this a number of times. And, heard certainly from Rav Yitzhak Zev Soloveitchik, the Brisker Rav, that he heard that sometimes you got to stand up for Torah, even if no one is going to listen. Now, many rabbinical authorities today will say that's not the path, right? That is not the path that we should take. Protesting, what do you look like? A bunch of rabble rousers, right? Essentially, you're out there saying, "No, you're desecrating Shabbos." You're paving roads where there are potential graves there, etc. What are you doing? Standing up, this, that. Maybe nothing's going to come out of it. But my Rebbe's told me many times, that even if nothing's going to come out of it, because I asked him once, point blank, did this protest, that protest, the other protest, okay, and if nothing comes out of it, so what's the point? He says, because I'm not going to get upstairs after 120 years, and God's going to say, hey, Moshe, how come you didn't do anything? How come you didn't stand up for me? Nobody stood up for me, and if no one stands up for God, right, what happens? It looks like we all agree. On the other hand, people will say that's not the way we do things today. We don't want to antagonize others. But for certain things, let's say desecration of Shabbos, certainly desecration of bones, if they're going to overrun a, place that has potential, burial place there, etc. So that's something you cannot stand by. You cannot stand by and not protest. Many, many years ago, at the beginning of the state, when someone died, they used to do autopsies, right? Many times they would do autopsies. So there were rabbanim in the middle of the night. There were rabbis in the middle of the night, would steal bodies, literally steal bodies, in order that they should have proper burial and not go through autopsy, right? Autopsy, pretty terrible thing. Certainly when a person dies, first thing that they should do, obviously they have to be buried. They have to have proper purification, etc. They have to go through that. And here in Jerusalem, no question, they don't within 24 hours, someone's buried, right? They don't let the body stay more than 24 hours. Now, there are some exceptions, outside of Israel. Someone needs to get there. They can't get there. It takes time, whatever. They may hold the body a little bit, but in Jerusalem, 24 hours, on the clock.
Here
Less
in
than
Canada,
24 hours,
it's like
that
3
person's in
days
the
to
ground.
a week.
Yeah, we're not, you're not going to hold them, a couple of days, a week, whatever. It's very, very painful to the soul, not to get his judgment. The soul doesn't know, the soul knows what's going on, can't get back into the body, totally confused, as the Zohar says, and goes back to places where it knows, i.e. goes back to where it lived, to their kid's house, whatever. That's why a person has to be careful. Let's say they go to a mourner's house. What's the only thing in the secular mourner's house they talk about? It's the person who died. They talk about everything else. Talk about politics, talk about Afghanistan, talk about Trump. I know Trump's 4-letter word. We're not going to mention him. Talk about other things, sports, CFL, who knows what. They won't talk about the person that died, right? They won't talk about the qualities of the person that died. That's the whole point. But I was at a mourner's house, by a relative who passed away, and someone was there, and they say to this person's spouse, I remember your husband buy all the smorgasbords, buy all the shrimp, buy all this. And like, oh, I probably shouldn't be saying this. And I was sitting there like frozen. Now, if the soul of that relative is hanging around that house, imagine what the soul hears. That soul understands what absolute truth is. That soul understands what judgment's going to be. Right now, imagine that's what that soul hears right now. And that soul is hearing, all these terrible things that they've done, etc. Another relative that helped raise millions of dollars for a secular charity, right? A secular non-Jewish charity, right? Imagine if they would have given that, that money they helped raise to Jewish charities. But okay. They raised more than $100 million. Right? It wasn't their
Wow.
own money. They happened to be super wealthy anyway. But they helped raise $100 million for a secular charity. Now, there was probably more than 1,000 people at this funeral. They gave a lot of money to charity. I'm not going to say, a lot of those charities, what they were worth or not worth. It doesn't really matter. But imagine this person now understands what absolute truth is. And this person sees, wow, I really could have helped my fellow Jews. I really could have given it to proper things over here. And what did I do? I helped raise $100 million. Not chump change over here. $100 million for a non-Jewish charity. So I could imagine that soul, people eulogizing, saying what a gifted person. Look how much they helped other people, gave all this money to charity. And the soul's out there screaming, just keep your mouth shut. I'm getting killed over here 10 times over. Because now I realize what the truth is. Maybe I should have listened when I was healthy, when I was younger, this, that, so all that money. So now someone's going to ask the $1 million question, why would somebody have that kind of money and it just goes to waste? Right? Let's say all of it, goes to a charity not worth spit in my language. Right? No merit. I mean, it might be a minimal level of merit over here. But why would God in general give all this money, to certain people? They spit in God's face. They don't care. Athletes, actors, actresses, who knows what. People mega, mega wealthy. And they're scum of the earth. Most of them. Right? Most of them we wouldn't even let walk in our door. Right? We'd be afraid. Who knows what they're going to say, what they're going to do, etc. They're not the, let's say, they're not the Rhodes scholars that we may think, right? So people look up to them, whatever, it's because they can hit a ball or they can act or whatever the case is. Do I care what they say about politics? Do I care what they have to say about Judaism? There's an actor I'm not even going to bother to mention his name. Guy's an idiot, an absolute moron, and he's like, he just like pushes off about Judaism. Oh, come on, no one really believes that. Come on, that's not this. He goes on and on, shooting off his mouth, right? I don't know, wherever I saw this interview, and at the end of the day, do we really care what he says about Judaism? The guy can't read Aleph Beis, right? He can't read Aleph Beis. He's never learned in his life, right? So who cares what he says? What he says about politics? I care what he says about politics. I care what he says about anything else. Let him stick to what he knows about. What he doesn't know about, keep quiet. That's what I say about most people. If they know what they're talking about, good. If they don't know what they're talking about, I made a video last week. There was last week's Torah portion that we just read speaks at the end of the Parsha. It speaks about Yibum. What is Yibum? It's called Levirate marriage. What is Levirate marriage? That somebody dies, right? A guy dies and he never had children. Right, so what happens? He doesn't have children. The wife, if the husband has a brother, then the brother should marry the wife. To Levirate marriage, they have a son. You name the son after the dead husband. Right? So Yibum we don't do anymore. We don't do it anymore. Why not? Because most people today wouldn't do it for the sake of heaven. Let's say. So what do? We have a solution. We call it chalitza. What is chalitza? The Torah says that you take a shoe. I once saw this in Jerusalem. They put posters all over the place because it's not very common, to see. So everyone packs in to see it. You have this shoe, and the woman is probably much older. She spits in the shoe and whatever, and everyone's like, looking to see if the spit is clear or whatever. She has to spit again. Imagine. You got like, I was once, my Rebbe's rabbinical court, I took him to go, and here you have all these people crowded into a tiny room, right? Like, let's say 50 people. It was like, I was like smashed up against the wall, right? So you have all these people watching, they're going through the proceedings, and all this, and then it comes the time, they bring out the shoe, now it comes the time for this older woman, most likely, right? She's a much older woman. And now she's going to get up and spit. So now everyone's sitting there looking like this. They're like, okay, let's see this woman spit. It's like, she's like going through all the motions. You can't even imagine this, whatever. So she spits, and then everyone looks, is the spit clear? It has to be clear, and whatever, different laws, right? So
What's
what
the
do I
purpose for
mention
that?
this? Right, so why do I mention this? It says, Mori Rebbe, Rabbi going to Moshe Stor Moshe should be well. Everyone should pray for him. Moshe ben Devorah, he, hasn't been feeling so well the last few weeks, right? He should be well. And so he says like this, it brings down from the Rebbe of Kovna, and he says like this, he had a maskil. What is a maskil? It's like a Jew that went off, a secular Jew, doesn't believe in Judaism, doesn't believe in God, etc., went off, as we would say, being a Jew. And this wayward Jew, what does he say to the Rav of Kovna? He says, come on. He says, why are we going to embarrass this woman? Why are we going to embarrass this older woman? She never had children, and you're going to make her go through this. And everyone's going to watch her go, she's going to spit and all that. Everyone's going to watch. It's embarrassing. Why would we allow her to do it? It's so embarrassing. But what is really behind what they're saying, right? What this idiot is saying? He's saying, oh, it's archaic. This is old school, way old school over here. Why would anyone in their right mind do it? You're embarrassing the woman. It's this and that. So the Rav of Kovna answered like this. The Rav of Kovna said, you know what? I would agree with you, but I want you to make me one promise. I would agree with you, but only on one condition, right? So this wayward Jew says, okay, what's the one condition? He says, I want you to go to all the doctors, and I want you to tell the doctors, I want you to eradicate death in the world. Mm. I want you to get rid of death in the world, right? That's what I want you to do. I want you to get rid of death, right? So this wayward Jew says, what are you kidding? We don't have the power to do that. No doctor has the power to do that. Forget you can't control your own bowels. You're not control of anything. All these different things. We can't control death. We have no power over death over here. So says the Rav of Kovna the same thing. We don't have the power to say we're going to change anything that the Torah says. Not one iota, right? We're not going to change it for nothing, right? So now, Dan, the man's going to ask, Makesher, what's the connection over here? Great story, right? Remember what we said, that sometimes we're going to have to protest to show that God knows there are people that care about his Torah and are willing to stand up to the Torah and are willing to say, we're not going to change it one iota, right? So I've said many times, many times, you want to say the Torah is not true, prove it. Don't tell me it doesn't fit your world agenda. Don't tell me, oh, I think this and I think that. You know what? We don't really give a lion's lick or whatever you want to call it. We don't care what you have to say. No one cares what I have to say, etc. Is the Torah true or it's not true, right? So you want to bring me proof it's not true? Show me. Show me from the prophet. Show me from the writing. Show me. Don't just say, oh, this doesn't make sense. Wearing wool and linen together. That doesn't make sense. Not mixing milk and meat also doesn't make sense. I have kosher meat, kosher cheese. Who says I put them together, and I cook them, that makes it forbidden? That doesn't make logical sense. There are many things in the Torah, 80% or more. Doesn't make logical sense. Okay, that doesn't mean it's not true, right? And if you were on a debating team and says, I don't like this. This doesn't, this is anti-pig. This is anti-non-Jew. This is anti-who knows what. Or what do I care, right? Show me why it's not true. You think this is antiquated and this woman's going to get up and spit. And she's going to, right? She's going to go through all the motions to spit. You got to say, oh, that's cruel. It's not a question whether it's cruel or not. Question is, tell me why it's not true, right? Show me, right? My father would always tell me, show me the green, right? I.e. as in money. Show me the proof. I want to see the proof. Don't tell me it doesn't fit your world outlook. Irrelevant. So even if people are going to make fun, and people are going to scoff, and people are going to say, oh, the laws of kashrus, you know what? It has nothing to do with trichinosis. Of course it doesn't have anything to trichinosis. You're right. It doesn't. Right? We're not worried about trichinosis. That's not why we keep kosher. Right? When this person opened up their mouth, we're eating bagels in a kosher restaurant. So, yeah, I don't have to keep kosher anyway. No problem with trichinosis. I said, idiot, you're eating a bagel. What does that have to do with trichinosis? They're like, all right, whatever, pass the salt. Like, that was it. That was the end of the conversation. So I would say, put up or shut up. You got a good proof. Tremendous. Let's hear it. But you're just saying things to make fun. And you say, oh, it doesn't fit my world outlook. So I still have to stand up for Torah. But there's another mistake. There's another serious mistake, and I see this all the time on social media. I've seen a number of people do it, and they feel that someone says something blasphemous. They feel they have an obligation to stand up for God. Now, social media in general, most likely whatever you're going to say probably will offend somebody. Right? So we have to be careful with that. Speaking about Lashon Hara, we've spoken about many times. Very hard to repent if you spoke Lashon Hara against someone. Billions of people see this post. It never gets taken down unless there's censorship, which there may very well be. But in general, it's not going to be taken down. How do you repent for that? Impossible. Right? Very much impossible. So, does that mean I have to answer up for God? Who says? God can answer up for himself. But sometimes I may have to stand up. That's true. Right? There are times the person may have to do that. But who says I have to do it all the time? And there are people out there just like to argue with people. That's what they live for. Right? And, I told someone, I said, thank God you're not a student of mine. Just give me a bad name. Sitting there arguing left and right and this and that. What do you look like? A rabble-rouser. That's what you look like. Okay. Sometimes heretics have to be called out. Sometimes we have to tell the truth.
Well, we lost you. You froze for a second.
There are times where that is going to be the case, where we might have to do that. Do I say it has to be done all the time? Doesn't have to be done all the time. There are people who make that mistake, right? But we have to be willing as well to stand up to others, even if nothing is going to come of it. Now, Maravi's mentioned to me before, years ago, all these Russians, these non-Jewish Russians, were coming into Israel. Now, interesting enough, the chief Sephardic rabbi of Israel months ago made a comment about this, saying that all these Russians that came in aren't Jewish, and they wanted to hang them. The secular media wanted to totally destroy him. And he said, what are you getting so upset about? I'm quoting statistics from the Israel Bureau of Statistics. I'm quoting your own sources. What are you trying to hang me for? I'm just telling you what you don't want to hear. Right? But essentially, this is the case. So Mori Rebbe said, way back when all these non-Jewish Russians were coming in, who was sitting in the Ministry of Interior, without getting into politics, who was sitting in the Ministry of Interior? Ultra-Orthodox Jews. Now, ultra-Orthodox Jews knew there were non-Jewish Russians coming in. They didn't say anything. Now, it could be the reason they did it. They were given kickback and other things. They kept quiet for different reasons. Who knows what? Doesn't really matter. So now you got a million non-Jewish Russians eating pork, wanting to import pork into this country. They're self-hating non-Jews, right? They hate Judaism. They certainly hate ultra-Orthodox Jews. So Rebbe said, if God forbid there's a war, whose side do you think they're going to side with? You think they're going to side with Israelis? You think they're going to side with us or the other side? He says you're making an element, a huge element of non-religious non-Jews over here, quote-unquote Jews, that are going to do whatever they can to fight religion. Why? That's how they're brought up, right? No religion, atheists, different things. You are bringing them into the country with a blind eye. Right? Sorry, not with a blind eye. You know exactly what's going on. So he made the connection. Wasn't so clear to me, but he made a connection because we're doing that, because we're allowing all these non-Jewish Russians to come in. That's the reason we have problems with the Arabs.
You're locked up, Rabbi. Uh-oh, says there's a poor network connection on your end. Oh, we may have to hang up and redial, Rabbi. Uh-oh, there I am twice. Ah!
The person whom you're trying to reach is currently unavailable. Please leave a message.
Need to reconnect. This is what Rabbi Coffman sees.
The person whom you're trying to reach is currently unavailable.
Sorry for the inconvenience, folks. Shalom, Rabbi. I'm sorry. I don't know why, but the connection got poor and you were freezing, and then it was just best to shut her down and reconnect. I still don't have your video. Oh, we got some technical difficulties on Rabbi Coffman's end, folks. I assure you it's not here in my studio. Everything's flowing fine. Boom. Yeah, I have that up here so he can see when I have a question. I don't know about you folks, but here in the West, yeah. We got fiber optic connection. They don't have that degree in Jerusalem, and a lot of them poor connections. Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi, and Well, he says he's trying.
The person whom you're trying to reach is currently unavailable. Well, I apologize, folks. I only have so much control over. There we go. Shalom, Rabbi. I don't have your camera. Oh, there you are. Now we have you back.
Yeah, sorry, I got knocked off. I don't know exactly why. Could be my connection, not exactly sure.
Could be a cloud. You don't know. You just never know. We're glad you're back.
Okay, so as we were saying that, we're not going to get into, we're not going to get into politics, right? But, as we mentioned, in this case, what do we have? So we have, as my Rebbe said, that you had Orthodox Jews in the Ministry of Interior. They look the other way. Millions of Russians come in. And what happens? So he's saying that if, God forbid, there's ever a war, we're going to, we're in trouble, right? We are definitely in trouble. And you have these non-religious, secular Russians, right? Non-Jewish, let's say even better, right? And they could create absolute havoc here, right? There's no question. So that being the case, how could they do such a thing, right? How in the world could they do such a thing over here, knowing that this is what's going to be, and looking the other way, because you're not allowed, really to bring in non-Jews over here. But I understand secular Jews, right? Secular Jews, it makes perfect. It's the Israel in general. I definitely understand why they want, this, because they want to offset the ultra-Orthodox, right? That makes perfect sense. They know we're expanding by leaps and bounds. They're not having any kids. And they know in the future, right, 20, 30% of children in schools today in Jerusalem are Orthodox, right? They're also Orthodox Jews. That scares the life out of them. So that being the case, I understand why they wanted to bring in, these non-Jewish Russians. What about Jews? What about these ultra-Orthodox Jews? I don't have a good answer. Right? I only have bad answers. Potentially why that is. And doesn't matter. We're not going to get into politics. But the point is that sometimes 100%, you have to be willing to stand up for Torah. And again, even if it's about money, even if it's about losing out, even if it's about you're not going to get the end result. You're not going to have any good end result. Nothing is going to come out of it. But again, does that mean I have to fight all the wars? I have to fight all the wars on Facebook? Most times I see people say things, everyone's going to fight them. Okay, so let other people fight them. I have to sit there and waste my time? What do I have to waste my time for? I don't have to waste my time. I think other people waste their time thinking they're doing it for the sake of heaven, right? Thinking they're doing God's work over here. So it could be. Maybe there are times we should stick up for God. But you have to have proper rabbinic authority to do such a thing. If you were to ask most rabbis today, right? Most rabbis, should I be on social media and should I go answer up these heretics? Right? Is that what I should do? Now, I can't imagine anyone who has half a brain is going to say, yeah, that's a great thing. We want you to stick up for God. We want you in there and fighting. Why aren't they learning? Okay, you want to spend a certain amount of time on social media, minimize it. But you're going to spend a heck of a lot more time. You're going to waste a lot of breath. It's not worth it. Right? So why isn't that person learning? Right? We mentioned last week by someone making videos, about Jewish law, can't pronounce any Hebrew words. Right? So what's he doing making videos if he doesn't know what he's talking about? I don't care what his intention is. Right? People are going to pat him on the back. Yeah, you made this video. You made this great video against these heretics. You don't have anything better to do? Let other people waste their time doing it. You want to learn Torah? Learn Torah. Right? Spend the majority of your time learning Torah. Not waste your time doing this. Right? People are going to ask me the same thing. So what are you doing on social media? Good question. Very good question.
We appreciate
but the answer, simple answer is I'm getting the word out. I'm getting people to see what I do, getting people interested in Torah, right? Trying to bring people back, other things. So you're going to say, do the ends justify the means? Not always, right? Not always, but it's a venue to get people to, A, to wake up, B, tell them what you do, et cetera. But how much time do you have to waste doing that? That's the whole question, right? That would be a whole question. because you would say probably there are plenty of things you see there that you probably shouldn't see, right? Right? You got to be very careful. Now, even if we know really nothing is going to come out of it, even if nothing's going to come out of it irrelevant, right? It doesn't really matter. There are times that you need rabbinic authority for this. There are times the person has to be out there, protesting. Again, we're not talking about making fun of people, throwing things. It's that you are showing what they're doing is wrong. Finished. Right? There's a parade, and God forbid, downtown Jerusalem, one of these parades, etc. People should be out there by the thousands saying it's wrong. Because the people aren't there protesting, doesn't matter. They're not going to listen. Whatever. You're not there to provoke 100%. But if they're doing it in the holy city and they're doing it in God's backyard, do not think there's not going to be payback. Right? So there are times. There are times you have to be out there. Right? Obviously, you have to know when. Obviously, you have to realize even if nothing comes out of it. Right? So now, we also have to be strong. And where there are no true righteous people, nonetheless, can't back down. Even if we don't know that much, we have to have proper guidance. But if no one is there, if no one is there to be the leader, so then you can't back down. Right? You have to be out there. Now, many times, I certainly could have been mistaken as well. Many times, my own family, I answered. People made comments. I'm the only one that represents Torah, right? So I felt, anytime someone said something, going to hammer them. But you're right. They're just going to make fun more. They're not going to, etc. So what are you wasting your time for? Very well true. 100%. If you're going to answer someone and they say, that's my agenda, right? It's like arguing with a brick. You could do that. I don't recommend it, right? But you could do that, and no, they're not going to argue in the same plane. Right? So if they're not going to argue on the same plane, what are you wasting your time for? True. Maybe you want to try and get them to see your side. They're not interested. Right? But, what do we think sometimes? We think that it's my obligation to say something. Now, sometimes it will be. Right? You have to know when. I would say it's best just to pick your challenges. Just to pick your time over here. To answer everything someone says, they're not necessarily saying it to be malicious. Maybe they're saying it to make fun. Maybe they're saying it just to get under your skin, just to see a reaction.
Oh, yeah.
As we mentioned many times, if they're not asking a question, they're making a statement. What is the answer? The answer is, oh, that's the answer. And then you're going to try and get under your skin. And finally they say, why do you keep saying, oh? And the reason is because you're not asking a question. You're making a statement. I can't answer a statement. I can't answer an answer. You're not interested in an answer.
Yeah. Claims.
Right? But again, it's aggravating. People don't take us seriously. They make fun, but God forbid you can't make fun of them. Right? You can't say anything against them. But sometimes we just have to stand up anyway. I would say pick your issues. Every single issue is not worth it. Right? And God's not going to say, okay, I'm going to pick this issue. How come, you pick that? Maybe, there will be, small detail we missed. And that really we should have said some things about this, but we said some things about other things, not as important. That could very well be. Doesn't mean I have to speak up every time. But, again, people can say, well, we can agree to disagree. Yeah, we can agree to disagree. You're just not showing respect. Right? And you, God forbid, have to show respect for all their garbage. Right? Oh, you can't say anything bad against them. God forbid. Oh, what are you getting so hot under the collar? Why are you doing, why are you raising your voice? Because you sound like an idiot. You sound like a racist. Right? But if I, oh, you think I'm a racist? I mean, whatever. There's a lot of things that get very heated. It's not worth it. Right? In many cases, it's not worth it. But you have to know, a person has to know what is worthwhile, to speak out against, and what isn't. And I've learned this the hard way, over the years.
Me as well.
I won't say the easy way, but I learned it the hard way. And over time, I realized, you know what? Not everything deserves to be answered, but I'll pick my issues. If I see something's really egregious, etc., or maybe something said in front of my kids, I'll nip in the bucket, and I'll stop the conversation, or, whatever, which I did once. And I just said, you're not going down there. They just changed the conversation, right? That was it. So certain things, okay, you got to pick your issues. Most issues, I would say, are not worth the time. They're just not worth the time because there's no one to talk to. So you have to know. You have to know which
got to be
issue.
ears listening, yes?
Yeah, but, again, even if nobody's listening, right? Sometimes I would say, you have to say something strong, right? Even if they're not going to listen, right? I'll give an example. Someone says, I've been married to a non-Jew for 35 years. Nothing's happened to me. I'm not worried. I said, well, you should be worried tomorrow. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, but certainly you should be worried about the next one. So other person say, oh, I'm not worried about that. Come on, I'm not worried about that. So I said, well, I think you should be, and said, oh, you're pretty confident it doesn't exist. You're pretty confident there's no next world. On a scale of 1 to 10, let's say you're at 8. You have that level of confidence, right? So what do you say to such a person? You say, wow, you study philosophy? Socrates, Aristotle? No. Study modern philosophy? Kant, Kierkegaard? No. You've studied Jewish philosophy? The Rambam, Rabbi Huda Levi wrote the Kuzari? No. You read the Bible from cover to cover? No. So what do you really believe in? You don't know anything. Never studied.
Uh-oh. You froze again, Rabbi. There was a poor network connection. Let's see. We'll give him another shot, folks. I don't know why. The stream is poor connection today. It just happens from time to time there, I guess. We take so much for granted here in the West. I just hope you guys are patient with us. I mean, all I can do is try my best to link up and connect and bring it all to you. I'm thankful that I have. I do tests beforehand. Hello, Rabbi.
3?
We got you back. Yes. Part 3.
So I don't know. We'll have to edit this later. But anyway, so a person, they answer, you basically corner them, which they're not going to want to be cornered, right? But essentially, what do you say? What are you telling them? You're telling them you haven't studied philosophy. You haven't studied Jewish philosophy. You haven't read the Torah. You can't read Hebrew. So how can you say, I believe this? You're going to say, that's my agenda. That's what I believe. That's what I hold. So what? It's not an answer, right? It's totally not an answer. So somebody like that, where they have an agenda, right? They absolutely have an agenda. So what are you arguing about? Right? The waste of time. But sometimes I would say, give a snappy answer and see what they say. Like someone will say, well, isn't circumcision barbaric? You say, no, barbarians don't do it. Right? I've never been able to use that. It's a good line, though. Right? So what do? So, you have a snappy answer to a snappy question. It's not about agenda. Right? It's not about it. Like, I don't care what you think. I care if the Torah is true. Right? That's what I care about. Now, you want to show me the Torah is not true? I'm open. I'm all ears. I'm ultra reasonable. Let's see. Put up or shut up. Let's see what you have to say. But what do we have to show? Someone who's going to be a leader over here, even if they don't know very much, has to show the Torah does not make compromises. We're not going to stray one iota from the Torah and its dictates. We're not going to do that. Now, you want to say it's outdated. You want to say, God forbid, it's archaic. God forbid it's this, God forbid it's that, it's the other thing. So my question would be, okay, that's what you think, very good. Do you have any proof for that? Do you have any proof? No, but that's what I believe. That statement does not show that the Torah is not true. Now, you may say, why am I going to waste my time with such a person? Different issue. But if that's their agenda, and basically you break down their agenda and they realize they've been wasting their lives for 50 years, they're not going to want to do that. So what are they going to say? You're a fanatic. Okay, I'm a fanatic. True. But give me an answer, which I told somebody once. Give me an answer. Tell me why the Torah says it's okay to intermarry. Torah says 100 times. Right? It says many, many times. You're not allowed to intermarry. So what does it mean? Oh, you're a fanatic. Okay. But even if it's man-made, what does it mean? Just give me an answer. Give me an answer what it means. No. Okay. So there's nothing to argue with. It's not, they'll say, I would never change and this, that, and it's this, that, and the other thing. It doesn't show anything, right? You can see it's one of my pet peeves. Put up or shut up. Show me proof. If you don't show me proof, that doesn't mean, I have to live and let live. I can knock you out in 20 different ways. That's why they call me Checkmate, right? So I can knock you out in different ways. So if I knock you out in different ways, what happens? Come back with an answer, right? That last week's parsha that we just read, right? We just read says an Ammonite and a Moabite cannot come into the community. Well, Ruth is a Moabite. If Ruth is a Moabite and we don't have oral law, where does King David come from? For the Jews and Christians. Checkmate. You need oral law. Because otherwise, she can't convert. She can't convert. There's no King David. Period. Right? There's nothing to talk about. So we're not going to move from what the Torah says. You don't like it, tough noogies. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether you like it, you don't like it. It's irrelevant. Right? The question is, did God speak on Mount Sinai or not? Right? Someone said last week, a few weeks ago, I'm still waiting on an answer. They said, with the Midianites don't let the Jewish people go through. They won't give them bread and water. Jewish people say, we're not going to attack you. So God says, okay, wipe them all out. That's cruel. How could God say that? And you got, we also mentioned about the mother bird, push away the mother bird, take the eggs. That's also cruel. God forbid. Right? So I said, well, getting back to the Midianites and how cruel it is, you could say the same thing about King Saul, right? The prophet, same as the prophet says, the name of God, everyone agrees he's a prophet. He says in Samuel 1, chapter 15, wipe out the Amalekites. And he doesn't. He leaves the king. He leaves the sheep. He has his own ideas why he's doing it. So God, what does he do? What does the king do? Shacks up with someone, has a child. She gets pregnant, whatever. Who's an offspring of that? Haman. Mr. Haman himself, the whole story of the book of Esther. Right? So you think you know better? So I told this person, go back and read the book of Job. Go back to the last 2 chapters where God chastises Job to no end. Absolutely chastises him. You were there when I created the world. You were there when I played with the Leviathan. You couldn't even sit by when the Leviathan would breathe on you, you'd die. Plus all his fangs and all this, and all these animals I keep alive where they really should be dead, etc. Are you there to do that? No. Can you do any of this? No. So what does God say to Job? Basically, he says in my language, just shut up. That's what he tells him. So I don't need you. You're going to question me. You know how I run the world. You can't even control yourself. Can't even control your own bowel movement over here. Then all of a sudden you're going to tell me how to run the world and how I run the world? Right? So the person told me, he says, I'm going to read the entire book of Job. I said, okay. And I'm still waiting. I told him to read the last 2 chapters. Last 2 or 3 chapters. Says clear to make my point. So you want to say in your puny brain, you want to say I know better than God. Right? I'm God himself. And that's cruel. Yeah, the way you look at it is cruel. Right? But, I mentioned about the Amalekites. The Amalekites, what did they bring to the world? Doubts. They brought a cynical world. Right? In other words, everything's chance. There's no supernatural. Nothing. That's how Haman dies. He's pinned down by angels. Right? On Esther's couch. And Ahasuerus comes in and says, what? You're going to take my He's going to take my queen in front of my face, but he can't say he's pinned down by angels. Why not? He doesn't believe in angels. He doesn't believe in the supernatural. So essentially what happens to him, he gets killed by his own motto. But let's understand, we're living in an Amalekite world, right? Cynicism, within cynicism. Oh, come on, believe in religion, opiate of the masses. Can't believe in religion, can't be square. Come on, ask Mr. Hawking. Stephen Hawking over here, right? We'll make fun of him and Al. Mr. Einstein. They both agree there's an expanding universe, but they don't have scientific proof to show why it's expanding. Oh, we'll find the proof. We'll find the missing link to evolution. Okay, but I want an answer according to science. So what's Steve and Al going to say, or Al and Steve? What are they going to say? We don't have proof, but we'll find it in science. Okay, so I would say, Al, Steve, let's have a discussion. You don't have an answer in science, but I may have an answer according to Torah. I may have an answer according to 6 days of creation. Oh, no, we're not listening to that. We're not going to be brainwashed. Okay, Al, Steve, Al, you got a better answer? You got a better answer for me? No. Oh, we'll find it. Don't give me excuses. I want an answer right now. We don't have an answer. Thank you very much. You don't have an answer. At least you have to entertain the possibility that creation might be true. You can't just throw it out there. That's the only other alternative. Unless you want to say, I'll tell you a funny story. I had to write I took one of my last courses in university. In college, I wrote about, the course was about New Age religion. So I learned all about witchcraft, other things, whatever. And so I wrote a book. I wrote a paper, about the myth of Atlantis. Now, anyone knows about the story of Atlantis? Supposedly the mountains of Atlantis are by the Bermuda Triangle. All these, boats and aircraft supposedly disappeared and all that. So there's a legend, many different places, how these Atlanteans, how they got destroyed, right? How they destroyed themselves. So, it sounds like a nuclear explosion, some type of explosion, whatever it was, destroyed the island, etc. So, I was very upset. I had to give this class on a Friday before Shabbos, and my professor wouldn't let me give it earlier. So I wrote this whole paper. What was it based on? So I'm building it and building it and building it. Where did they get this technology? Where did they get this technology? Everyone's on the edge of their seats. And I say, and what's the proof? What do we have? What's the information? The information is Martians. They got information from Martians. So everyone was on the floor hysterically laughing. And my professor says, you better have documentation for this or you're going to fail. I said, I got plenty of documentation. Right? Psychics, other things. I said, the proof is in the pudding. I passed the class. Thank God. I passed the class. I actually got a pretty good grade, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The point is, we can make this up. We can make that up, make something else up. Okay, is it true or is it not true? You want to live with fantasy. The Rambam says in the beginning of 13 Principles of Faith, it's either you believe in God, and God is absolute, or you believe in idolatry. There's nothing in between. If you want to tell me you believe in fantasy, fine. Okay, but show me. I want to see proof. I want to see concrete proof why the Torah is not true. I'm just not interested in agendas, right? Agendas don't do anything for me because I don't care how you want to live your life. I don't care how you want to justify it. And you want to be a homosexual, you're going to come out of the closet. Explain to me Leviticus chapter 18, verse 21. Right, or 22. Explain to me what that means and why that, and why that's forbidden. I'll tell you why it's forbidden. Because that whole chapter talks about forbidden relationships, right? Daughter-in-law, father-in-law, wife from your uncle, all these different relationships, forbidden, right? It also mentions homosexuality, also mentions bestiality. It's about immorality. In short, it's about immorality. And that's what we read on Yom Kippur. At the afternoon service of Yom Kippur, of all things, we read about immorality, etc. So, okay. You say, well, this is what I feel. This is what I feel more comfortable with. Well, it's an unnatural desire. Torah tells me it's an unnatural desire, but this is the way I am and whatever, and I don't care about the Torah. Well, you're arguing on different levels. That is true. But even if we have different desires, doesn't mean the desire is right. Even if God wired me that way. Right? There is a radical rabbi out there who says, the ultra-Orthodox are going to hate me for saying this, but if someone's born that way, it's not their fault. What do you mean it's not their fault? And if I was born an angry person, and I'm wired to be angry, and it comes out many different times, isn't it something I have to work on? I'm not saying I did it myself. I'm saying I'm wired that way. There are people wired in different ways. We can do things that make it worse, make it better. But even a person says, well, this is who I am, this is how I'm wired. God says, well, that's great, but I didn't tell you to act on it. I'm not interested, you act on it. Now, if you go according to the Torah, so it's totally forbidden because it's something unnatural. So you want to tell me, okay, but it's a desire and this and that. It's fine. Doesn't mean you're allowed to act on it, right? In any way. Even if you would say, a doctor once told me, well, they've isolated the gene. Mentioned this before. They've isolated the gene. Okay.
So we got a vaccine for
it. You're right. What about the gene? A miserly gene. You don't like to give charity. 10% of what you make after taxes. What about an anger gene? What about a lazy gene? What about, okay, fill in the blank. I can be wired many different ways, and it can all be genetical. So what? That just means I have more biases towards it. I have more of an affinity towards it. Okay. And it might be harder to break. I agree. That doesn't mean I'm allowed to do it. You're still going to get punished. So God's going to say, don't you know I wired you that way? You did things to yourself. That's not an issue. We're not talking about that. If you're wired a certain way, right, it had nothing to do with what you did. Nothing to have to do with the environment. But you got wired a certain way. Doesn't God say, okay, that's part of your psyche, but doesn't mean you can't break it. Doesn't mean it's impossible. Might not be so easy. But see, we can make excuses. Oh, it's genetic. Right here, it's genetic. Well, you're going to say, getting angry is genetic. Okay, let's say it's true. Let's say it's true. And you got these really nasty, this really nasty anger gene. Okay, I may agree. So what? That means I have to, that means I'm going to have to work on it a heck of a lot. It's going to be much harder to overcome. I agree. Right? But if God says, I wired you that way, not for you to act on it, you can't say, well, that's who I am. I've had people say this, this is who I am. I'm never going to change. Now, if God made you that way, you have a little bit of an excuse. I would say 3% of an excuse. You're going to say, it was too hard for me to overcome. It's part of me. Right? But the other 97%, God's going to say, but you could have overcome it if you wanted to work at it. You just didn't want to work at it. Yeah, you had a question before.
No, I just when you get into a little bit of the evolution question, I do have some difficulty in the sense that the definition of survival of the fittest from the purest standpoint is that adaptation in the midst of an unfavorable circumstance is the one that survives. And can that not be likened to provision from Hashem? And we see replete examples. I mean, just like Hashem sparing Noah. I mean, there was that provision in an adverse environment. I've always had difficulty with the position that demands an instant, literal point in time a confinement for Hashem that went poof. I don't think Hashem is like a genie that goes poof, as if he moves through moments of time and goes poof. He's above and beyond. I think the miraculous is more seen in the provision of Hashem in divine timing, rather than confining the notion of Hashem to moments of action. We know that he conveys himself in many different ways, but when it says in the beginning, right, it's not saying that time is over Hashem, right? That's not Torah.
Right, because God was busy, destroying and making worlds before, right? And then he just came to this world. That could be why dinosaurs don't exist. It could be the age of the universe, right? Potentially why the age of the universe is so high, according to science, not according to us, etc. But essentially, what are we saying over here? God put things into the world, right? The Ramchal stays clear in Derech Hashem. What are we doing here? Are we here for free lunch? No, we're here to strive, right? We could make serious mistakes, just like the Torah says in the beginning of Genesis, let us make man in our image. Well, who's we? The English would say no problem, right? It's the English
Well, if you look at it from a coding standpoint, a programming standpoint, it's a different story.
Yeah.
When Hashem said, let us, it becomes the drive of everybody. And this is why everybody has differences of opinion.
Yeah, but the commentaries say, who's he speaking to? Right? It's a problem. However you translate it, it's a problem. Because you're telling me God is speaking to someone else. Who does God need to speak to? Right? In other words, a person can say, maybe there's another God. That's one thing one of the commentaries say. A person can make that mistake, believe in multiple deities. Right? If you want to go in the right direction, Talmud says, God will help you. You want to go in the wrong direction, you can do that also. But what's the answer? The answer is he's speaking to the heavenly court to show God's humility. Does God need to speak to the heavenly court about making man? No. Does God need the heavenly court? No. But there's a discussion, the Talmud says, between Hillel and Shammai, between the house of Hillel and Shammai, 2.5 years. Is it a good thing for a man to be created? A bad thing? Back and forth. 2.5 years. You got your geology for 20 years. 2.5 years. They're arguing back and forth. And what's the conclusion? The conclusion is it was a bad thing to make man. But since man is created, they should look into their actions. God says to Abraham, right? He's going to tell Abraham what's going on in Sodom. God to destroy Sodom. God says, let's see what's going on in Sodom. What do you mean, let's see? Who's we? Again, same thing. Same thing. So we see through creation, God can speak, show humility, can also make a mistake. Person can say, oh, this is really what God wants. Meaning multiple deities. Person can make that mistake. How many times does the Torah say, don't believe in idolatry? Don't think about it. Don't bow down to it. Don't do all these other things. Don't make graven images. Why does God care so much? Right? Obviously, if people are bowing down to things, right? Even if they don't give it power, but they give what it represents power, etc. So what does that do? It takes God out of the world. That's what it does. So God says, I'm a jealous God. I don't want it. I'm not interested in it. And if a Jew bows down to it, he's liable for a death penalty. Right? A non-Jew is a good question if he bows down or not. Right? But if he believes in idolatry, for sure. Right? For sure, it's one of the Noahide laws. Certainly one of the Noahide laws. So that being the case, yeah, God put things in the world, in order, we have to be in this world in order to struggle, in order to toil, in order that, we try and overcome our evil inclination so that we can have a portion of the world to come. That portion of the world to come will not come unless we've been in this world. Right? In other words, no one can say, I deserve a portion of the world to come if they've never been here. The whole point of being here is to struggle, to overcome the evil inclination. Right? That's what we're doing here. That's essentially what we're doing here. Now, there's a way to do it in the right way, there's a way to do it in the wrong way. But we said before, there's right and wrong. Right? One of the 13 principles. God knows the thoughts of man. God knows what's right, what's wrong. So we believe in an absolute God, right? First the 13 principles. So Torah tells me many times, do this, don't do that. Someone's going to say, how do I know that's true? Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. Want to see proof? We got proof. We can show proof. But, someone's going to say, without all that, it's just what you say. You think there's right and wrong. You're right. There is right and wrong. But I'm a good person. So I had a conversation with somebody many years ago, right? And I said, go on this conversation, and I'm a good person. I said, define good. What's your definition of good? Now, I could have said, Stalin thought he was good. Pol Pot thought he was good. Hitler, Yamach Shemoy V'Zichro, may his name be blotted out, may he's rot wherever he is. He also thought he was good. But if you use that, they're going to say, if you bring up Hitler's name, you're going to say, what, compare me to him? You lose the argument. They won't even hear the argument. They won't hear the rest of the argument. But
we're losing your backdrop a little bit, Rabbi.
Okay, so when,
at
the end, when I got him in that conversation, what did the person say? The person said, I don't know how we got this conversation, but I'm ending it right now. Because they knew where the conversation was going. They said, I can't believe you got me in this conversation, but we're not having it. Why? Because they know if I'm right, that's the bottom line. So again, again, all these things that God, that we get tested, maybe we test ourselves, maybe God's testing us, maybe it's, what our reincarnated soul has to go through. There are many different things going on. One thing, though, we can't say is even if we didn't bring something upon ourselves, we don't have the right to say, okay, God, let's say we agree God wired us in a certain way. Now, everybody's got their own biases. Some of them, some people don't like to give charity. Some people get angry easily. Some people, I don't know, fill in the blank. Whatever, some people are conceited. Some people, who knows?
Yeah,
Doing the
every
character.
variety, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's got their own thing. Some do it more, some do it less. Some have a combination, right, etc. But at the end of the day, God says, I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to go in that direction. But I have more biases towards it. Now, let's say a person does it to himself. We'll make it even easier. So a person does something first time, whatever it is, it's wrong. So what do? Maybe they feel bad. They try and work hard not to do it. They do it a second time. Once they do it a third, a fourth, a fifth time, now it's part of your nature. So now you can't blame God. You did it to yourself. So now, if I did it to myself, what am I going to say? You don't have excuses. You're going to say, okay, it's part of me. Well, who did that? God's going to say, I had nothing to do with this. You did it to yourself. You made this part of yourself. So you're right. So when a person's done something wrong, this is good for the month of Elul, as we're 2 weeks in, right? Almost 2 weeks in. We're in the month of Elul, and it's all about introspection. It's all about judgment by Rosh Hashanah. So the more things we do on a regular basis that are detrimental to our spiritual nature, the worse off it is. Right. Why? Because we get into bad habits. When we get into bad habits, what do? We start doing things by rote. Right? It becomes part of us. Once it becomes part of us, it's very, very hard to change.
Well, it's definitely not free will. It's giving up your free will to rote, isn't it? It's a terrible behavior.
But you always have free will. No one's putting a gun to your head and saying I have to act on it. But the problem is, you're right. Once a person starts doing things by rote, which is akin to spiritual death, because I prayed today, I was just reading something earlier that, my Rebbe said, about Elul and about, you take somebody, sitting and learning all day. Yeshiva student, they're sitting and learning all day. They learn in the morning, learn in the afternoon, they learn at night, they learn Jewish law, they learn, they're praying, they're doing all these things, right? So what does the yeshiva student say? What do I have to work on? I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm learning, I'm praying, I'm doing all these things. So Rabbi says, yeah, but you still have to think about what you're doing. It doesn't mean you're totally guiltless. It doesn't mean you never did anything wrong. You're right. You are doing a lot of the good things. But again, even if you're doing that, you could be doing it by rote also. And by doing it by rote, it's very hard. Right? It's very hard to overcome. Right? We are creatures of habit. So I guess more of my Hasidic side here coming out. We should probably sing and dance a little bit more, right? We should really, we say every day, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. We should serve God with great joy. So even though we might be half asleep in the morning, when we say it, but what does it really mean, right? So I spoke at a Shabbaton a couple of weeks ago, up north, and I mentioned this in respect to something else. And I mentioned that, you know what this means? This means someone who comes into Judaism, whether it's a Noahide, whether it's a potential convert, we can never take things for granted, right? Or someone who returns to Judaism, right? Becomes an Orthodox Jew. They weren't born that way. So we can't take anything for granted, right? In other words, we have to see everything as being fresh. That being the case, shouldn't we be thankful? Shouldn't we be dancing with joy every second? Because look where we were last week. Look where we were 6 months ago. Look where we were a year ago or more. Now, what's the problem? Why don't we sing and dance a little bit more? Why aren't we ecstatic about the fact of where we've come from, where we are now? Now, a person can say, listen, I make mistakes. I'm not where I want to be. I got sidetracked, this, that, many things. Many things. Person can get sidetracked with. Okay, but aren't they better off than where they were before? Right? I would venture to say they're better off. 100%. They're not pagans anymore. They're not bowing down to idols. They're in a much better place because now they see what reality is. Now they see, quote unquote, what the truth is. I've seen the light, right? They've seen the light. They know what truth is. So how come we're not doing the moonwalk? I mean, I don't know if anyone's doing the moonwalk. I don't know, how come we're not whistling Dixie over here? Because we're so ecstatic we're going in the right path. Now, what's the simple answer? Simple answer is we get beaten down in life. That's the simple answer. Got bills to pay, kids to raise, other things. Everything seems to be very hard. No question. Sometimes
Sweat
it's
of our
hard.
brow.
Sometimes it's easier, right? It depends. Depends on the situation, right? But the problem is we think I'm going in the right path. Everything should be good. Everything should be glass, right? Everything should be smooth. So if you look at Abraham, everyone's worshiping idols, here's Bob, right? Here's Bob. Don't leave home without him. Everyone's got their own idol. So Abraham says at the age of 3, the age of 40, he sees a world of design. And he says we have to worship the designer. So, all these idolaters say, well, has God ever spoken to you? No. They ever shown you? No. But I know it to be true. Right? So then what happens? You would think the whole world, a bunch of idolaters. And Abraham says there's one God. He brought absolute monotheism to the world. Now, the Torah calls him Avraham HaIvri. People mistranslate and they say Abraham the Jew. Now, even if you tell me he kept the Torah before it was given, whatever that means, it doesn't mean he's Jewish yet because the Torah wasn't given. So it means Abraham's on one side of the world. Abraham means one side. And idolaters on a different side. Right? They're on the other side of the world. Now, comes Abraham himself, brings absolute monotheism to the world. What happens to him? Famine. What happens after that? His wife is taken. What happens after that? He has to save his remaining relative, Lot. Right? 4 kings against the 5 kings. Okay. Got to go to war. And there's circumcision at the age of 100. God saves the best for last. And he has to, sacrifice, his true son. That goes against everything he believes in. So God's going to say, Abe, what do you think about this covenant? What a beautiful covenant over here. Right? Doesn't make any sense. Because God gives Abraham everything he wants, and whoever believes in him, God's going to make it easy. Everything's going to go smooth. Everyone's going to want to join. God's not interested in everyone joining. Right? Abraham comes on the scene. He takes the bull by the horns. Right? And he works hard. So with all that, what does God show him? What does God show him? He puts him through 10 trials. 10 very, very difficult trials. The person coming into Judaism, and I've seen this more than not, someone who wants to be a Jew, wants to go through conversion, everything is turned upside down. Livelihoods turned upside down. Their house is turned upside down. Things go wrong all over the place. Sometimes more, sometimes less. A lot of different things happen. Right? So, people may say, well, why is that fair? Why is that fair if I want to go in the right path and I want to do the right thing? Why is it I'm getting knocked around? So simple answer is we don't know. But beyond that, we understand it's measure for measure. We may never figure out the measure for measure. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, imagine the water carrier, the mailman, does something wrong. Do you think the king's going to wipe him out? King's not going to care. He's a ball boy, right? He's a water carrier over here. He's a nobody. Is the king going to really care what he does? No. On the other hand, if he's second in command and he goes against the king or he does something wrong, not something simple, he does something wrong, what does the king say? You'll look a little bit better without your head. Right? In other words, why? Why is he getting judged so severely? He's getting judged so severely because he's close to the king. If he's not close to the king, what does God do? So he'll give you $1 million, give you all this money, make everything go easy here and there. Doesn't mean you won't have any trials, but at the end of the day, they don't have a clue. Right? God just says, I don't want your prayers, I don't want anything. Right? I heard the story, recently someone went to visit family, and their family, happens to be mega, mega wealthy. And this person being told about, the millions they have in this, the millions they have in that, private jet. We're talking like mega, mega wealth here. They don't have a clue about life. They don't appreciate what they have. They don't think about other people that don't have. They want it for themselves, maybe for their kids, but it's all about what? It's all about making money. It's about having money. It's about having things. We're going to see one day in the next 50 years, I hope I'm still alive to give this class, right? And that'll be who is considered somebody rich. Somebody rich is someone who's called Sameach Bechelkoi. They're happy with what they have. Yeah. They have a lot, they have a little. They're happy with whatever they have. They're not, in two Mishnahs, we're going to see.
How do you balance that in growth?
In Mishnah 8, we're going to see that the more a person has, right, the more possessions, the more worry. Right? In other words, it doesn't say it makes them happy. Right? The Mishnah says the more worry, the more that you want to try and keep it. The more that you want to try and, make more money, in all these things. Doesn't mean it's going to make you happy. But what are these people, these people that are so shallow? They don't think about anything else except money. Do they think about helping people with money? No, with their money? No. But they're sitting there bragging, I got so much money. Imagine, they're talking to someone who's barely putting bread on the table, and they're struggling. I got so much money, I have no idea what to do with it. But they won't give it for you to help. They want, you're not making a good living, that's your problem. You waste your time studying Torah, it's not my problem. Right? But they're so shallow, they have no idea. There are people like that. I mean, fortunately, there are probably a lot of people like that. What, I should help other people? I should remember where I came from. Some people have that idea, a lot of people don't. But it's just a disgusting thing because, now they think that God, the God's gift to the world. They can sit there and brag about it. But what can God do? God can turn that over 1 second if he wanted to. Right? But essentially, what's God doing over here? Potentially. Right? These evil people spit in God's face. Right? So what does God do? God says, you know what? I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to give you boats. I'm going to give you planes. I'm going to give you more money than you can ever want. Why? Because I have to give you, if you help Granny cross the street, I have to pay you, right? God says I have to give you the weight of that mitzvah. Whatever that mitzvah is worth, I have to give you in this world. Why am I going to give it to you in this world? Because I certainly don't want you in the next world. So I'm going to give you whatever the reward is, and I'll give you plenty of it because I'm going to wipe you out in the next world. They're going to say, wow, these evil people, they seem to have it so easy. Yeah, they have it easy. Doesn't mean God's not going to cut them down, but it also doesn't mean they're having a portion of the world to come. So let them enjoy it now, big deal. They'll get it. They'll either get it now or later or both, right? So it doesn't really matter. But that's the question. Righteous people want to do the right thing. Someone wants to convert, and they're working hard to move to a community, doing all these different things, and they're getting slammed upside the head, right? In my language, it's the old Louisville slugger, right? They're getting slammed over here. A person says, what's going on? I want to be close to God. I want to do the right thing. You're right. We sin. We make mistakes. We do terrible things. We repent, hopefully. But if I'm trying to do the right thing, and if I'm holding better, let's say, better than 90% of world Jewry, where they're holding. And I'm trying. Why am I getting slammed? Why am I having it hard over here? What's the answer? What's the answer? What's the answer? The answer is because now you want to be close to the king. Now you have a greater understanding. And God's going to say, okay, now the stakes are different. Before you didn't understand, you were a potato farmer in Idaho. No offense. Anyone who's a potato farmer grew up in Idaho, or you're living in the prairies, nothing better to do, watch the CFL. Had to get that in, right? Had to watch the CFL. So what? So at the end of the day, now I know better. But if I know better, guess what? That means I have more responsibility. If I have more responsibility, then God demands more from me. If God demands more from me, then it could be what I did yesterday, God doesn't care about. God's not worried about. Now that I'm on a higher level, now that I want to do good things, you really think the evil inclination is going to sit back and say, okay, we're going to give him a free pass. But someone's going to say, Rabbi, come on.
Happen, yeah.
This happened, that happened, the other thing happened. You're right. I've had a lot of things happen in my life. A number of things happen in my life that, were very hard to deal with.
Evil inclination never gives you a break.
To deal with. I went through an odyssey of 15 years. Something went on for 15 years. More. It's actually like 16, 17 years almost. There's finally a certain level of closure. Now, I have no idea potentially why I had to go through this. But at the end of the day, I can talk about it, give strength to others because I went through it. Right? Because I understand. I've been on both sides. I definitely understand. But what about all the years of plenty? Right? Someone asked, what about all the people you helped previously? So what? I get that merit.
They disappear, don't they? Very fast, like a gas. Poof, they're gone.
Yeah. So in the end, I still get the merit for helping people. Right? So I don't have any regret for that. You know why? I'll tell you after what I learned afterwards. And that is, comes the evil inclination. The evil inclination says, you know what? You've had it good for all these years. You're keeping Torah mitzvahs. And this is the thanks that you get. What could a person say? God forbid, you should never, ever, no, it doesn't matter what happened in your life. If a person would say it wasn't worth it, and all the mitzvahs that they kept weren't worth it, you lose everything. Every last mitzvah that you've done is gone, erased. Oof. Why? Because you don't have a karosat.
Gratitude.
You don't have gratitude.
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't, like we could say, there are people that'll say, and it is heresy to a point. People will say, well, life isn't fair. Right? Now, I would also say life isn't fair. But why do I say life isn't fair? Why is that not heresy? Because God's the one running things. So the way we see it, the way a person would see it, we don't know what God's plan is. We don't know why we're going through certain things. Right? But just because a person does the right thing and goes in the right direction, that doesn't mean it goes smooth. Right? So we can say, okay, the righteous are going to suffer for minor things they do. So a person may say, well, that's not fair. It's not a question of being fair or not. When you're closer to the king and you make wrong decisions, the king says, okay, maybe you'll let something slide. Maybe. Right? If he's in a good mood. But if you made an egregious error, you made, it's not like you made a $10,000 error. Okay, that's bad. You made a couple $1 million error or something else, and the king's like, what are you doing? If he's a ball boy, right, a water boy, a mailman, the king don't care. And, in other words, you're not doing anything to affect him. But if you're somebody that's close to the king, or you want to be close to the king, it's a different issue. The problem is we all want to know why we go through certain things. Right? That's what we want to know. Why are we going through this? Why is this thing difficult? Why am I going through this? That's what we want to know. But there's nothing worse than being in doubt. So, person will say, but I want to know, what's the measure for measure? What did I do over here? And the answer is, okay, we have to think about our actions. We have to think about what we've done. We have to take stock on a regular basis. But at the end, we may never, ever figure it out. It could have been something you did last week, the week before, a month ago, a year ago, and all of a sudden God said, okay, I'm taking payback now. We don't know. We don't know what the measure for measure is. Sometimes it's more obvious. Many times we don't have a clue. But someone's going to say, I want to know. Well, it doesn't matter what you think.
Yeah.
We'd love to know. We'd love to know.
Well, it's just like you said earlier with some of the kashrut laws, some of the, like the meat and milk you started out with.
Some of the things in my own life, I think I understand to a certain extent why I went through certain things. Chili, I'll never figure out, right? But it could be, and this is coming to light now because of what I'm trying to do up north. I mentioned last week, right? And that is that when I was up and running, I had my own learning center. I had these big plans, and then God said, "No, absolutely not."
And there's nothing you're going to do when He says no.
And I got cut down, and it was nasty, and this and that. Okay, but you know what? More than 20 years later, right? Sorry, it was less than that. About 17 years later, now I'm coming to the realization. Had I wanted to do what I wanted to do back then, I probably wasn't ready to do it. In my own ego,
even though you may have thought you were,
and what I thought I could have done potentially, maybe would not have been successful. It wasn't my time, right? I had people tell me that maybe it's not your time, But the problem was I saw success. I was good at what I did, and I got cut down, and it bothered me to no end. Why? Because if a person's not cut out to do certain things, you give them a certain amount of time. There are two Rashis in Chumash that say what? That say a Levite, when does he start working in the temple? One place it says he's 25. Another place it says it's 30. There's a discrepancy. Comes along Rashi and says, what's the discrepancy? Why 5 years? Because you give someone 5 years to learn in order to see if they're going to see anything from their learning. See if they're going to be successful. But it has to be, when they know how to learn. Can't be just, my kid's learned since he's 8, till he's 18. Let him get a real job. Or let him write a book on tax law. I'm sure that's going to help thousands of people in the world. No, you got to give him an opportunity to see if he can really learn, to see if he can become something or not. So if a person sees in 5 years they don't have so much success, so what do the rabbis tell us? You'll never see success. You just won't, in general, right? You give yourself an opportunity. If you see it's not going, it's probably not going to go, in general. Doesn't mean it can't change, whatever. Not going to go there. That's the point, right? So now I started out, with a big group because I had money and this and that. And it was a talk of the town, unbelievable things going on, brought in great people to speak, gave classes myself, tremendous. And then it got cut down, right? Seemingly like out of nowhere. I'm totally above nature, the way it should have happened. I had this whole plan. I had this whole thing. So what bothered me to no end? What bothered me to no end, see, the show is great. And some of my classes are great because I just get to vent. I get to vent about my own life.
Well, hopefully it helps you in some way, shape, or form.
I always say if I can't help my family, maybe I can help others. But also, it's good. I think venting in general, is good depending what it is. But I came to the realization.
Well, you work things out. You work through things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I came to the realization that, 17 years ago, no matter how good I thought I was, it wasn't the time. I mean, deep down, I understood that. It was 1 second. It was hard to, it was hard for me to fathom because I built this whole thing up. I was like, how can I give this up? This is what I'm born and bred to do. This is what I'm good at. If I wasn't good at it, okay, then I can understand. You're not equipped to do this. I know somebody wanted to go into, doing Jewish outreach, etc. And he wasn't a vessel to do it. He just, whatever, personality-wise, other things. And the person basically gave up and went into other things, right? Not everyone can stay in outreach anyway because there's no money in it. But in general, if you don't see success, you probably won't see success. But if you've seen success and you've tasted success, and it's not about money, it's not necessarily about prestige, and it's not about people necessarily patting you on the back. I mean, that feels good, right? It's good for your ego,
You
right?
want
But
to give
in the
Hashem
end, you're
glory,
helping
right?
others. You're inspiring others, right? It's a tremendous thing. So if I didn't have any of these vessels, I couldn't do anything. I wasn't a people person, all these things. Okay, so I gave it my shot. I tried to do it. It didn't go. So I should go and I should be involved in other things. See, that's what really got on to me because at the end of the day, I'm good at that. This is what I'm born and bred to do, essentially. God-given talents, not my own, no question. But at the end of the day, it bothered me because why should I be cut down here? Especially if things are going good. So what's the answer? What's a simple answer? God said no. God said it's not your time. And when I was going through this, and it was a trauma, no question. But when I was going through it, I couldn't hear that. Why? If I'm doing such good things, you want to say, it got to my head so much, I had an ego, and God said, okay, I'm going to cut you down at the pinnacle, not let it go, maybe. That could be any number of things, right? But it's just something that so didn't make any sense because here I was trying to help people do a good thing. Now it comes along the evil inclination and says, come on, look what we did before, look what he's doing here. Let's end it over here. Right? So that didn't make sense to me. Now, when someone says, you know what, it's not your time, you got to put your effort into anything else. But what does the Chosel Bible say? You stick to what you're good at. You don't change, right? But if you have to make money, you have no choice. Okay, right? But really, you should stick to what you're good at. So this, I can't tell you, it was annoying. It was extremely annoying to me not to be able to do what I love, right? But what now? After all this, 17 years later, see, I'm kind of thick in the skull here. 17 years later, now I got a different opportunity. Right? I've been giving all these classes, started with converts, working with Noahide, doing these other things. Things are moving in different ways, in a lot of different things. So now all of a sudden, this opportunity comes up a year and a half ago. I wouldn't have necessarily thought it would have been up north, 2.5 hours from where I live, in a more of like a farming type of community. I mean, it's a mixture of people there, whatever. But with all that experience in the last 17 years, I mean, I've only been teaching converts, let's say, for 13 years, more or less, and no height even less than that. So with all that and life experience and everything else, now this opportunity is a whole different thing. Because before, when I was doing things, I had no help. So now I have a certain level of help. Again, we're going to see where it all goes. But now I can see with a clearer mind that had I done it 17 years ago, it wouldn't have been the same. It just wouldn't have, the whole bigger picture wouldn't have been the same. Working with converts never would have entered. None of these things. Right? Now, back then, even, if God would have come to me in a dream, in a vision, or a prophet, I don't know, I would have had a dream, right? And God would have said, don't worry about it. In 17 years, you're going to be well equipped. You're not going to lose out over here. You're definitely not going to lose out, just the opposite. You want to do this, and you're going to be persistent, and you're going to travel, on 3 buses. It's going to take you 3.5 hours to get there. You're going to get back at 10 o'clock at night,
exhausted,
even though I can sleep on
worn
buses.
out.
Even though I can sleep on buses, it's not the end of the world, etc. But at the end of the day, again, hopefully God is going to bless this whole endeavor, but it's a different ballgame. It's a whole different thing. I'm much more equipped with so many different things, to be able to do this, even though it's a humongous project. So now, 17 years later, I can actually admit, even with a straight face, I'm not lying here, right? To say that, now it's clear to me that with all these things, I wouldn't have been able to do what I wanted to do, most likely. Right? It wouldn't have been in the same capacity I can do now because now my life experience and knowledge is totally different than what it was, way back when.
Amen.
Yeah.
Hashem knows what he's doing, isn't it? Amazing. All I can say, Rabbi, we just finished the Olympics. And, if anything, when it comes down to the highest degree of potentials, right? You know as well as anybody that there are loads of people that might be able to run a 10-second 100-meter dash, right? 10 seconds,
But when you start going below that, that 10-second mark might put them in the 95th, 96th, 97th percentile, but getting beyond that to that where they're able to hit that 9.6, 9.5 second 100-meter dash, it takes so much more effort and development to get to that level, that additional, that to get to that 97th, 98th, 99th percentile. Hashem knows what he's doing when it comes to polishing a person, like a potter would with clay. And all I can say is,
you're right.
we would never choose. We would never
choose. God's in charge. Yeah.
We would never choose.
God's in charge.
If we knew what we had to go through to get to where we needed to go, we would never do it. We would never choose if we knew what we had to go through to get to our heart's desires.
You're right. That's why we're not giving that information. But if we would live what the Chovos Levavos says in Duties of the Heart, that the mantra is God is the one in charge. He runs the world. You have no complaints. You're saying, okay, this is what he wants. This is the best. This is for the best. What in Achamish Gamzu? The Rebbe of Rebbe Akiva said, Gamzu, it's over. Everything is good. Imagine a paraplegic with boils all over his body living in a hovel. You're going to say everything is good? Because there is no such thing as bad coming from God. We just view it. We just view it as something that isn't good, where it's hard to go through. It's hard to digest. But if we lived what Nachum Gamzu said, not just Rebbe Akiva said, Kol David Rachmanu L'Toiv of it. Everything that God does is for the best. No, everything is good. I just have to be able to live it. Right? I just have to put that in my mentality. So even if life is hard, we still understand the goodness, and that's what we mentioned before, right? That we serve God with great joy, right? We serve God with great joy. We say every day, even if it's hard. Now, it's a lot easier to pray, I think, when things are easier. It's a heck of a lot more, or I would say different. When things are more difficult, we pray with a lot more fervor, right? That there's no question. At the same time, we got to realize where it all comes from. So now, I could say, beyond the shadow of a doubt, I know where things come from. I do understand. It's not like I've never read up on it. I've never studied it. The difference is you got to live it. And when the chips are down, as my Rebbe said, when's the Messiah going to come? The Messiah is going to come when we realize there's no one else to turn to except for God. That's what we have to realize. And no matter what happens in our life, it's not about Jewish politicians, right? Religious politicians. We're not putting our stake in men. We understood that from the Holocaust. Never, ever, ever put your stake in men. Ever. Not the U.S., not anybody. Right? At the end of the day, God's the one in charge. Now, we may have difficulty understanding what's going on around us. Does it make sense? There are a lot of issues. Right? There are a lot of issues. But if the mantra is God runs the world, God's in charge, then I have no questions. Oh, does that mean you have a leap of faith? No, that's for the Christians. But if I understood and I continue to understand where it all comes from, don't you think most things we do, maybe we don't do right, we don't do the way we should. There are many, many different levels. We shouldn't even get out of bed. Right? It's probably dangerous to get out of bed, in general. But the idea is I got to put my best foot forward anyway, even if I fail at different things. Could God zap me for a million different things? Of course. Right? There are many things we do wrong. Go after our bad thoughts, whatever. Yeah, I'm working on this. I'm working on that. Don't make excuses. Right? God doesn't want to hear excuses. You're right. You're trying hard. Maybe that's all true. But don't you think, in God's eyes, you still failed? And if you failed, then whatever that failure is, don't you think a person deserves to be punished? They deserve to be punished at a certain level. All right, but doesn't God have mercy? Shouldn't God have mercy? Should have mercy. Right? We don't even fathom. Yeah. We don't even fathom all the mercy. The problem is, what do people say? I want a quick fix.
Yeah.
I'm going through a difficult time.
What I want.
And it's very hard. And I want God to take this off. That's what we should pray for. Okay, going through a difficult time. We have to admit and we have to say, God, you're the one in charge. I don't deserve mercy. I make mistakes. you're the one to take this off from me. That's it. And we have to say that many, many times. And if God wants to squeeze us, it'll continue. If God has mercy and God takes it away, then you better not make the same mistake again. Because if you make the same mistake again, God's going to say, okay, I've had enough. You spit in my face once, spit in my face twice, 3 times, okay. How many times do I have to have mercy over here? But the problem is, fix it. I want this taken away. But we don't see the bigger picture either. Sometimes we go through certain things, and guess what? God shows us that even if we're going through a difficult time, what does God show us? God shows us, you know what? I'm going to open other doors. Because even if a door is closed, other doors open. Now, in your personal case, it seems like every door being slammed. You do this, gets slammed. Do that, gets, at the end of the day, and I'm saying this about myself as well, at the end of the day, you have to be an absolute pit bull. That's what you have to do. You can't worry what people are going to say. You can't worry, what's going to be. You got to put your best foot forward. Now, at the same time, it could be that, if financially things don't go, okay. But, a person has to be relentless. And if you're not relentless, it's not going to change, right? If a person, is down and they're having difficulty, what do we do? Right? What do we do? Give more money to charity. What do? We pray. And we pray a lot. And what can God say? God can say, I'm not ready to answer you yet. I'm ready. I want to squeeze you a little bit more. And he can say no. But does that mean I should give up? No. The evil inclination will tell you to. The evil inclination will say, no. You're not going to get. You don't deserve. Right? You're still watching the CFL. Right? All these different things. Why in the world should I change your lot over here? But at the end of the day, evil, as the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, evil does not run rampant forever.
No.
Right? A person's quote unquote bad luck, whenever they go through difficulties, do not go on forever. Right? At some point they stop. At some point it changes. Now it might change in a way we never thought of. Now, if someone would have told me, okay, you're going to go through a 17-year odyssey, and that, you're going to go through all this difficulty, but in the end, I'm going to make it up to you. But, I could have taken your life, but instead I decided to do this. So now, if someone was given that information from above, wouldn't you be whistling Dixie over here for the suffering you went through? Make it a lot easier. Make it a heck of a lot easier. But what's the worst thing? We mentioned the worst thing is not knowing. Not knowing why I'm going through this. That is the worst thing a person can go through. And the simple answer is, could be for a million different things. Right? But we want to know. We want to understand. I have a lot of questions. A lot of questions I'll never get answered. Right? Absolutely, I'll never get answered. And you know what? It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, what does God want? God wants you just to keep trucking. He wants you to keep going. He wants you to keep serving him. Does that mean you're not going to have questions? No. Does it mean you're a heretic if you're asking? Depends what level you're on. Right? But if you understand the bigger scheme of things, as we mentioned before, there are no questions. You just want to understand what you're going through now. Now, I would agree, just use Dan the man here as an example. Right? I would agree. All the efforts and everything you do behind the scenes, hours and hours, tremendous. Right? Anyone that needs any CG work, you call him, he's good. Right? Makes me look like a pro. Right? Energizer Bunny. World's exploding. It's unbelievable. But does that necessarily mean, it's going to be monetary compensation? There should be. And you want to do the right thing. You want to go in God's path. You want to bring the light of Torah. I mean, we'll take William Hall, give him an example. He's got 8,000 subscribers. Imagine if 8,000 subscribers, probably more now. Imagine if each one gave $1. $1 a month. He doesn't have to work anymore. You give him $1 a month or even 50 cents. Right? No, 50 cents probably not going to help. He needs $1, right? Or he needs at least 60, 70 cents, right? A month from each person, right? He could do Tanakh Talk 24/7. Imagine what type of programming he could do. People aren't going to give him 60 cents a month. They're not even going to buy him a cup of coffee. Some will, some will help him, etc. So where's everybody? So there's an evil inclination over here. There's an evil inclination when it comes to Torah, right? Torah, God could give someone for some stupid business, God give him billions. A yeshiva struggling to exist, nickels and dimes. I just read a story earlier, about the yeshiva of Lomza, which was in Poland, deep in Poland. They were starving. They're absolutely starving. So the head of the yeshiva, Rabbi Gordon, traveled to America. He was in America for 15 years. And he took over the yeshiva. There was a branch of the yeshiva in Jerusalem, right? 15 years trying to raise money. Why are yeshivas so hard to raise money for? I mean, try to raise money, forget yeshivas. Try and raise money for people who want to convert, for non-Jews. People are going to say, why should I give money to non-Jews? Jewish outreach. Should give money to that. Russians don't know anything about Judaism. Give to that. Give to other things. Why are things that are worthy causes? Yeshivas, day schools, all these things. Why do heads of yeshiva have to be have to be collectors? And they have to go all over the world just to put dimes together. Right? So one reason could be because these communities, wherever they go, need to be strengthened. Right? So he goes from place to place getting money instead of getting it one shot. What's the reason? To give strength to all of these places. Right? To give over Torah to these places. To give people a merit in learning Torah, etc. So other organizations, Save the Whales, all kinds of other things not worth anything. God says, fine, you want all the money? Give you all the money because it's not worth anything. Oh, something worthwhile? You got to be in for the long haul. Yeah, I mean, doesn't mean, you do it so you're so poor you can't put bread on the table, different issue, right? But at the end of the day, you got to keep plugging. The Chovos Levovos says that you got to do what you're good at. Okay, but what if what you're good at doesn't make money, right? That's the whole question. I have this question, I had this also, struggling for a long time. Things have finally, turned the corner a little bit. Other things may be changing, but not everyone's going to say that that's the way to go in the sense that, well, it takes a toll on the family. You don't have food, you can't pay tuition, you can't pay this, and you're struggling left and right. So maybe you should go out and do something, maybe. Right? Maybe that's true. The Chovos Levovos does not say that. That's an absolute novelty. He says you stay what you're good at. You continue plugging away because you know what? It doesn't matter how much effort you put in. What the effort you put in, the novelty is totally irrelevant. Why? Because you can put all the effort in, it goes nowhere. Right? Unless God blesses. I had that in real estate. There were people much less IQ than me, no question about it. Not that I'm saying, I have 120 IQ. But these people, I would say, I was on this conference call once a week. They weren't Rhodes Scholars by any stretch, right? Some of them. Just the way they sounded. But they were doing exactly what this guru said. I was doing the same thing. They're making money. I'm not. Now, why is that? It works in every bracket, or in every community, right? It shouldn't be an issue. Doesn't matter how much real estate sells for. So obviously there was something else going on. What was that something else going on? God says, okay, I want to squeeze you, right? I want to make you not successful over here for whatever reason. For whatever the reason is. Now, it didn't make sense to me. I was doing everything everyone else is doing. But when you see that, you keep plugging, right? Maybe change this, tweak that, whatever. But you know what? The amount you plug, the amount of effort you put in does not necessarily mean you will be successful. Doesn't mean that. Right? Why? Because it has to be blessed. Exactly. So if God doesn't bless it, doesn't matter the effort you put in. Yeah, question.
No. Forgive me, Rabbi. I've got somebody I've known for a lot of years arguing the Jewish-Palestinian position, and he's just very anti-Semitic, and I'm just trying to defend the position. Anyways, the point being, it's just, distraction. Forgive me if I've seemed distracted.
No problem. So the idea is, which again is a major novelty, which we would never say, is that the amount of effort I put in, I should get afterwards. In other words, I should, if a person puts in a tremendous amount of effort, they should be able to make the money and compensate. They definitely should be compensated for that effort. Says the Chovos Levovos, it's not true. Why not? Because it's not about the effort you put in. You have to put your best foot forward in, no question. Tweak this, tweak that, tweak the other thing, but you have to remember the X factor. Right? Sounds like a bad movie, right? The X factor. What's the X factor? The big X factor, that is God himself.
That's right.
If you take God out of the picture, you miss the point.
The whole
again,
point,
a person has to understand their own, their own situation. But the effort that I put in now, imagine you want to help other people. You want to give over, do these different things. Now, does that necessarily mean person is going to get monetary compensation? Sometimes, right? Sometimes that might be the case, but comes along the evil inclination. And the evil inclination says, you know what? We want to squeeze people. Doing great job, bringing Torah to the nations. Well, if the nations change, doesn't that mean anti-Semitism goes down? Doesn't that mean the coming of the Messiah comes easier, maybe? In different ways. It's a whole different world, right? Seemingly it's a whole different world. So what does what does the evil inclination say? Okay, we'll give them a little bit of success. We'll make them put all this effort, but you know what? You're not going to get the ratings, right? Puts all these graphics in, Roku network, all these great things. You can't get people to chomp at the bit, right? Can't get, what do you call it? Advertising, that's the name of the game, right? Bringing advertisers, other things. Now, so why should it be so difficult? You want to do the right thing. Now, it could be something, God wants to squeeze you, but it could be, it could be the evil inclination says, I don't want this to go on because then the whole world's going to change. And that means I'm going to be out of a job soon, which is very true because we're living in the Messianic era, very close to the end, right? That may all be true, but at the end, but at the end of the day, person will say, if this is what I'm good at and this is what I can do, why should I be compensated something? I'm not saying it has to be a lot, right? But let it keep going, let it branch, let it be something, at the end of the day, what happens? It's, for Torah to spread. For Torah to spread, it has to be unbelievable self-sacrifice. It can't be for your own ego. Has to be 100% for the sake of heaven. And even then, even with all that, it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that, everything's going to happen the way it should. Right? So someone told me a month and a half ago, more, a certain yeshiva in Jerusalem or Samech that deals with people that didn't grow up, religious, and teaches them, etc. And one of the yeshiva said, if we were worried about money, then the yeshiva never would have started.
No.
Right? So that gave me the impetus to do what I'm doing now. Up north, I have a much bigger plan. Obviously, it takes money and money and money. It's a huge plan, a huge undertaking here. But in the meantime, if I think about money and what's going to be, you're never going to do anything, right? So, it's all about self-sacrifice. Has to be for the right reasons, certainly for the sake of heaven. But again, the evil inclination could try and put a major stop over here.
Sure.
Right? Who's going to raise money? Who's going to raise money for Noahites and potential converts, for non-Jews? Jews are going to put money into Jewish institutions, not for the sake of necessarily for Noahites or potential converts. But you're going to say, but that's also important. I agree, but it has to emanate, right, with somebody that believes in the cause. Most likely a non-Jew in the process of conversion, or a Noahide that has money, which probably, if a non-Jew had money, they're not going to be a Noahide. Just sort of goes against the grain, right? And you're looking for money from Jews, a secular Jew, why would they give money for that, right? So in general, it has to be someone who's like-minded, has gone through it themselves, or whatever the case is. But you say it's a great cause, right? It's helping non-Jews come into the fold. It's educating them, putting them in community, having them nurtured. It's a tremendous thing. You see, I'm plugging my own thing now, right? It's a tremendous thing. But get people to try and fund it, right? It's certainly not an easy thing, right? Especially, if you're talking about a lot of money, right? So, it's going to take effort. It's going to take a tremendous effort to do. I don't think there's any question. But don't think for a minute that the evil inclination is going to let it go and say, "Oh, really?
Yeah.
Let's see why this person's doing it. Let's see where his prayers have been. Let's see how much he's done spiritually and all this and all that." So all the evil inclination has to do is present that in front of God, and we're toast.
Oh,
And
yeah.
God's going to say, yeah, you're right. You know what? I'm going to squeeze them some more. Squeeze them a little bit more. And see where it all goes. But at the end of the day, we cannot be deterred. If we want to spread Torah, it has to be a tremendous amount of self-sacrifice. We want to convert, a person has to show. They have to put the pedal to the metal. But the person will say, so why do I have to suffer so badly? Why do I have to go through this? The answer is many times we don't know. And we don't necessarily understand the measure for measure. And it drives the person absolutely batty. And it drives them mad, but I'm trying to do the right thing. And I'm repenting. I'm doing all, you're right. No one's disagreeing if that is true. But at the end of the day, that does not necessarily turn the person over here, right? And a person's going to get the answers that they want. Now, if a person, has a dream, God comes and says, okay, it's because of this, that, and the other thing, a person, it's going to be hard for them to take in a certain way, but at least they'll have clarity. When living in this world, we have absolutely zero clarity about many things. Many, many things. Why? Because we're living in a world of God's hiddenness within hiddenness. So I would say anybody who wants that information and they want that clarity, they're not living in this world. Right? They're not living in reality. The reason they're not living in spiritual reality is because we cannot fathom in any way, shape, or form why things happen. At the end of the day, doesn't mean we don't have to try and put our best foot forward. Right, but I think it's very shallow for someone to say, well, I want to know the measure for measure. So you want to play God over here. You want to think you know better than God. The person will say, no. Doesn't mean I know better than God. What it means, I just want clarity. Right? But who says living in this world we're supposed to have clarity? I think it's a nice idea. I'm all for it. But once the temple was destroyed, we don't see God's presence. We don't see things clear. See things clear, I think, in the land of Israel, certainly than outside the land, but still, there are a lot of things that we don't see clear at all. So, wanting that clarity is a great thing. I'm not going to poo-poo it. It's a great thing to want clarity. Don't think you're going to get it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm saying on myself. Yeah. I'm saying on myself that something I probably should have realized a long time ago. Right? Now it's become clear to me, much clearer. I don't know why now more than any other time. Could be because I'm so into this other project, whatever it is. But now I could ask the question, okay, so what happened 17 years ago? Right? Why did it take 17 years to see it? Could be I just blocked it out. It could be I didn't want to see it. And people would tell me over the years, with everything you've been through, you're going to see the light at the end of the tunnel. That's great. That gives you a certain level of strength. But when you have a bill to pay in 2 days, and you have no idea where the money's coming from, that doesn't help. Right? Knowing the goodness is going to come and, living in this world today, the two don't mix. The two don't necessarily mix. But if we would live what the Chovos Levovo says, and what the duties of the heart say, we worry about a lot of things we should never worry about. So you can say, Rabbi, come on, this happened, that happened, I got this bill to pay, I have no idea where the money's coming from. But in the end, somehow it gets taken care of. And we could say, well, it wasn't pretty how it got taken care of. True? Right? Maybe that is the case. Maybe we had to borrow money from somebody, whatever. Right? But in the end, sometimes something's going to happen where we never thought, we never expected it, and God sends you a love tap. And God says, I just want to remind you I'm still here. Right? I had something happen the other day. I said, okay, it's going to be taken care of one way or the other. I'm just waiting over here. So what am I going to get so excited about? If it doesn't happen today, it'll happen tomorrow. If it doesn't happen tomorrow, it'll happen the next day. It's going to happen. What if it happens at the end of the week? What happens at the end of the week? Okay, hopefully other things will happen before that. So what are you going to worry about it for? You're going to drive yourself batty, right? But you have to put your best foot forward. So I said, okay, whatever's going to be is going to be. And that's it. God will take care of it. I'm not worried. Right? Sure enough, Shabbos is over. Check my email. Boom. Said, okay, there it is. So it happened a week later. Fine. Right? So even though I knew it was coming, a little bit aggravating, fine. But it came. Then came when I expected it. Okay. right? If it would have come another few days, okay. It comes exactly when God says you need it.
Right. He knows.
So am I gonna get bent out of shape? Am I gonna sit there and worry about it and God forbid have a heart attack over it? No. And what if it wouldn't have come? Okay, God will make amends in other place. Something else will happen, whatever it's gonna be, right?
Yeah,
But
he
when
rules.
I saw that, I
He
said,
rules
okay,
for sure.
that's it. He's the one in charge. And one of my prayers was, okay, you'll take care of it when you need to take care of it, and you're the one in charge. And if it doesn't happen today, it'll happen tomorrow, whenever you will it. And that's when he willed it. Yeah, but I needed it 2 weeks ago, right? Let's say. So Rabbi mine once said, no, that's exactly the time you're supposed to get it. Exactly when God said you're supposed to get it. Not before, not after. But it would have made life easier in other ways. Fine. Right? But at the end of the day, sometimes we get this love tap. And sometimes we'll say, you're worried about this, etc. And in the end, God says, you know what? I'm still here. I don't want you to forget I'm still here. But you said, yeah, I know you're still here, but I needed it a week ago. I needed it a month ago. Whatever the case is. But there are many times, and I can tell you from personal experience, things came out of nowhere. When you least expect it, God says, yeah, I'm gonna remind you I'm still here. Right? But if we have that proper faith in general, we don't have anything to worry about. Okay, I'm in this situation. Maybe I put myself in the situation. Maybe God put me in this situation. Right? But at the end of the day, what are we praying for? We're praying for, and we understand, God, you're the one in charge. And we have to say that many, many times. I'm not in control. Right? I'm not in control. That's not a leap of faith here. Right? It's showing what we need to show over here. And this is what my Rebbe said during Corona, people losing faith. Businesses closed, can't go out, claustrophobic, all these different things, having all kinds of difficulties. So my Rebbe said many times a day, a person should say, God, you're the one in charge. You're the one in charge. I'm doing nothing. I'm putting my best foot forward, and that's it. Whatever you do is fine. And I know at the end of the day, you're going to take care of me. But you know what? It's hard to live that way. It's hard, even if I understand the right thing, even if I've learned all kinds of Jewish philosophy, right? I still have to put it in my heart. There's a heart-brain disconnect. Even if I know what the right thing is, we forget. We just get caught up in life. We get beaten down in life. But, I want to make sure people understand we're living in a totally messed up world that we did to ourselves. And we're living in a world where God is hidden. Hiddenness within hiddenness. So people are going to say, but I still want to understand. Because the worst thing, as the Talmud says, is to be in doubt. That's the worst thing, not knowing what to do. Not knowing why I'm going through this. I get it. But when a person says that, what are they claiming? They're claiming they want to understand what Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't understand. They want to understand what the prophets couldn't understand if God didn't speak to them. We don't know. And we don't understand. We're living in a world of tremendous hiddenness. Why should I think I should be given the green light to understand? Do we understand all of a sudden, not to get into politics, do we understand why Taliban just took over Afghanistan? Do we understand what the potential to the world, to the threat of the world is with all this American machinery?
So far backwards, eh?
Does that, that sets the world in a tremendously bad position right now with all the technology that they have, right? Without getting to whose fault it is, and all that, and why we shouldn't be there. Okay, right? We're not going to get into that, right? But, there are other things going on here that we don't fathom. Could this be, now they're going to, team up with Iran, and who knows what's going to be now, and who knows what's going to be in the world. Could be a heck of a lot worse. We don't know. We don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's crazy, right? It's absolutely craziness. Now, you want to put a spin on it, and everyone's going to say why it happened, and why now, and what it's going to represent for the future. Does anyone really know? No. Nobody really knows. Right? Why all of a sudden now? Taliban's been dead for a long time. There's been, out of mind, out of sight. Been nowhere to be found. Ragtag bunch of towel heads, right? In my language. Been out of mind, out of sight. Maybe taking care of Al-Qaeda, very good. Fighting that war, whatever. But they haven't done anything recently. so to speak. I don't know, I've been really following it so much. But in general, why all of a sudden now? Why now? What does the future have in store? We don't know. Right? You got political correspondents saying this, saying that, people talking on their elbow. They don't know. They're speculating. Right? But we're not given information over here. We're not given any information. So now someone's going to say, you know what? I know. I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. I'm going to give my information. Who knows? Nobody knows.
Wow.
But the point is, we're living in a world of hiddenness. And I think people should realize, we go through difficult times. And there are many things we're probably never going to figure out in 10 lifetimes.
Right.
So I would tell you, try and fix up whatever you can fix up. Work on your faith in God and move on. Because if you don't move on, you're going to think, okay, why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why did the other thing happen? You're not going to know. Some things maybe we might figure out. Maybe. All right, I'm saying a maybe with a capital M. Maybe. Right? And I'm saying you're probably not going to figure out. And if you're not going to figure it out, forget it. You have to be better. We have to do things better. We have to be introspective. At the end of the day, we have to repent. But we have a lot of things to work on. I could sit here till tomorrow, which I'm not going to. Well, it's almost tomorrow for me anyway, right? But I'm not going to. And say there are probably 1.5 million things that we could possibly do wrong that God deserves to zap every single one of us.
Oh, yeah.
Well, isn't that pleasant? Isn't that pleasant? So now I can say, but why this, why that? Does it really matter? I mean, if it's something egregious, I understand. What do I have to work on? We have to work on everything. Some people say, maybe this happened because, Jewish women aren't dressing modestly. Maybe it's because of washing her. Maybe this. So what do I have to work on? Do I have to work on specific things? We have to work on everything. How do I work on everything? It's not easy. But why should we think we deserve an explanation here? If it's something obvious, measure for measure, very good.
Things just nag us, gnaw at us.
You're right, but again, what is it? What happened?
Well, it's part of resolving a matter, isn't it? I mean,
you're right, but if you want to tell me, it makes you a stronger person. It makes you closer to God. It makes you work harder to strive to be an upstanding Noahide or a Jew wannabe, a Jew in training, whatever you want to call them, or a Jew, and it makes you stronger in your Judaism. I hear it. But if you're going to second guess, and a person's going to say, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, and then it's going to paralyze someone, that's not good either. But I will say there are times where somebody goes through something and you say, it doesn't make sense. Why am I going through this? It could be for any number of things, but you know what? Sometimes, or many times, we mentioned earlier, a door is closed, but another door or two open. Now, it may take time for that. But you're going to say, but I have to suffer going through this, but these 3 doors are open. I'm not saying I understand the connection. If I did, you think I'd be talking to you people right now? I'd be world famous. I'd be a prophet. I wouldn't be wasting my time, a bunch of Noahides, or a bunch of Jew wannabes. Why am I wasting my time? I'd be on the cover of every magazine. I'd be world famous. But we don't understand. God said you can't see my face and live. Now, someone says, well, but I don't know what to work on. Really? Like I said, I could be here till tomorrow. Taking every nook and cranny of things that a person does in their lives and how they can do it better. At a higher level. And if you're not at the higher level, maybe you should be. And if you should be, maybe God's going to punish you because you're not. Right? Prayer, blessings, how we interact with others, how we deal with our family, million different things. And now you want to ask me what the measure for measure is? You don't have a right to ask the question. Right? The reason, again, I'm not saying the person's not suffering and they're not going through a difficult time. But there are so many things potentially that we all do wrong. Why in the world are we even going to question it? Most likely it's something we've done wrong. It's not just, well, if I can't figure out the reason, the Talmud says, it must be God just punishing me because he wants to give me a higher place in the world to come. Now, everybody I'm speaking to right now, including myself, and including every Torah giant in the world today, all of them combined, you think that's the case? I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case. Because everyone's done something somewhere, where we have to answer up. We absolutely have to answer up. It could be a million different things. And evil inclination is going to beat you down. It's going to say, well, I want the answer. I want the measure for measure. Well, you know what the answer is? You really want to know what the answer is?
No, you don't.
The answer is too freaking bad. Just deal with it. Right? Now, that sounds a little bit cruel, even coming from me. But you know what? The evil inclination is beating you down to a pulp. That's what it's doing. Yeah, I tried this, I tried that, I tried the other thing. None of these things worked. Okay, so who says to give up? The evil inclination does. But you may never figure it out anyway. But we're creatures of habit. We want to have closure. I'm telling you, I went through a nasty thing for 17 years. Had a certain level of closure. Did I sit there and waste time trying to figure out why? Could have been any number of things. Right? But, at the end of the day, that's not going to help me pay my electric bill. Feeling sorry for myself and what I possibly could have done, beating myself down, say, well, and what if I would have known the measure for measure? What if God would have come to me and he said, this is the measure for measure? That would have made me feel so much better. And he did something so egregious that God said, okay, I'm going to nail you for the next 17 years. And I'm going to make you suffer like a dog is going to be in your face. That make you feel better? Now, for some people, they'll say that's closure. I have a certain level of closure. Maybe. Right? Maybe that'll make some people feel better. Right? We don't like to be in doubt. I understand. Right? I definitely understand. But it's the way of the evil inclination to make you feel like a piece of dirt and say, okay, well, I'm working on this. Nothing's going. So we don't know. We don't have prophets today. We don't know. I have to put my best foot forward 100%. And I have to keep praying, God, take care of this. Take me out of this. But you know what? If you see the light at the end of the tunnel and different avenues have been open, now I'm not saying that's why I had to go through it, right? I'm not saying that's the only reason. I'll give a drastic example, and people are not going to like this, but too bad. The drastic example is the Holocaust, right? 6 million Jews died. 1.5 million children died. Now, what's the bone that God threw us after most of European Jewry wiped off the face of the map? What's the bone that God threw us? State of Israel. Right. He gave us the state of Israel. We're still here. See what happens. At the end of time, we'll see what happens. But in the end, that's a bone. Now, does that mean the Holocaust happened so the Jews could have their own state? I'm not going to go that far.
No.
Right?
No.
Is it a end result of what happened? It's an end result. Is that the reason? No, probably a million other reasons why the Holocaust happened that we're not privy to. Right? But that opened the gates to people to come to Israel, to build up the state, to build up tremendous Torah, greatest Torah learning in Israel, nothing to talk about. Right? Absolutely nothing to talk about. Regardless of all that, you want to tell me, a person's grandparents, great-grandparents had to die for the state of Israel to be born? That's not going to make them feel so good, right? No. They want their family intact. Parents went through hell, however they survived, right? They want that intact. They don't have it. They don't have aunts and uncles. They're all wiped out, right? So they have a lot of this brunt. They got this guilt and all that. Very hard to go through. You want to tell somebody that? That's why it happened? I spoke when I was interviewing for a job to be a rabbi in a certain synagogue. So I spoke about Gilgulim. I spoke about reincarnation. And a woman comes up to me at the end and she says, Rabbi, you're very, very clever. Right? This woman's about 3'5", had a tattoo. She went through the Holocaust, as a child. And she started speaking about all the travesty she went through and all the family she lost and all the difficult things and all that. And there was a guy there. There was a guy there trying to answer up, saying, you have to understand all the intermarriage and all this. And I just pushed this guy aside. And I said, you don't give someone like that an answer. She lost her whole family in the Holocaust, or a lot of her family. She's not interested in an answer, right? Even if it's true, more people were intermarrying, assimilation, many, many things. Is that the reason? Not the reason. Is it a reason? Very possibly. But somebody who lost their entire family in the Holocaust, that is not going to butter the biscuit. It's going to say, because people assimilated, I don't lose my parents, I don't lose my siblings, I don't lose my whole family. It's not an answer. Someone like that, you let vent, and if they have their faith intact, that's a bonus. That's a bonus. Someone like that, there is no answer, right? For them that they went through it, there is no answer, right? So, so the point is that, we have to realize beyond the shadow of a doubt, there is a plan, right? There is a plan over here. We're just not privy to what it is. But even, let's say a person suffers and they go through a very difficult time, but if they see with their own eyes, God opens up other doors. Other doors get open, but you had to suffer like a dog. Now, I'm not going to say, well, isn't the suffering worth it? I'm not going to go that far, because I don't think most people are holding by that emunah, by that level of faith, right? But the reality is maybe you have to go through this for self-sacrifice, tremendous self-sacrifice, right? I know somebody, I'll give an example. I know somebody that, has been serious about conversion for years, for a number of years. His wife didn't want to go down the same path, and basically no one's going to convert him, right? He wants to have an Orthodox conversion if his wife's not on the same path. Now, I wouldn't necessarily never tell anyone to get divorced because of it, etc., but they were sort of going different directions anyway, different reasons, not going to go into, but the point is what happened. So the person decided, okay, I want to do this. My spouse is not going to go in the same path, so, that's it. Getting divorced, and there were other reasons why they wanted to get divorced, not just because of this, and ends up getting divorced. Now, what happened? Person struggled, for a long time when it came to making a living, all kinds of different things, had it very hard. When the person finally put the pedal to the metal in order to do this tremendous self-sacrifice, right? Can't imagine the self-sacrifice here, right? So what happened? It opened up all kinds of other doors, right? Person should be finished with the conversion very shortly, put all his ducks in a row, and different business things started to go, right? In other words, in the right way, and I'm convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt, it was that self-sacrifice that opened up all kinds of gates in heaven. That when God saw that this person wants to, really wants to convert, and what he's willing to give up to do it, and the self-sacrifice, God says, okay, now I know this person's really serious. Now I'm going to open up other doors. Now, this person had it very difficult for years, for a number of years. Now, is the person going to say, well, now the difficulties he had, it's all worth it? Not, you're not going to go that far, that fast. But at the same time, what's the end result? The end result is this is the way I see it, and that is the tremendous self-sacrifice that this person did. What happened? God opened up other doors, right? And now this person is on the cusp of converting, but other doors have been opened financially, right? In many, many ways. So that being the case, why all of a sudden, right now, let's try and analyze. Why all of a sudden did it happen? What got the ball rolling? Then he got divorced. Right? That's what got the ball rolling. Then things snowballed after that, one after another. Now, is that the only reason? Not going to say that's the only reason. At the same time, I think that's a major reason, because the person showed that they're serious. The person showed what they're willing to sacrifice, in order to do that. And because of that tremendous self-sacrifice, doors were open. Now, again, I'm not saying that's the only reason, but it is an interesting coincidence. Once the person took that step, other ducks went in a row over here, and other things opened. Now, if you'd ask that person, okay, the last 5 years, you live day to day, literally day to day, etc. Was it all worth it right now? When, person suffered. They suffered tremendously, right? But now there's no looking back. Now, now other doors have been opened. So you can't spit at God over here and say, okay, I want all the reasons I want to know, but God just opened up a whole bunch of doors. If he opened up a whole bunch of doors, I had this in real estate also. Doors were shut, all of a sudden they opened in different ways. Didn't mean I got a paycheck straight away, right? But things started to open, in a major way. Okay, so you have to go through certain things in order to go through this. Now you're going to say, I wish I didn't have to go through those things. Okay, right? There are a lot of things we wish didn't happen. Irrelevant, right? But what's the bottom line? Bottom line is, if we see that the doors are open, you're going to say, but I spent this amount of time doing this, that, and the other thing. Okay. But it could be that got you to X, that got you from A to B. And because you had to go through that got you just to D, E, and F. Right. But, you got to say, what's the connection?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Hashem's amazing. It's
right?
just, there's no understanding. No,
we don't know, we don't fathom. But as you said before, I'll even give you credit. We want closure. We want a certain level of closure. We want to understand, right? That's true, right? That I'm not going to deny. That's 100% true. At the same time, we have to realize we may never be given that answer. And we also have to realize that if we see that doors are open, even if we don't understand the measure for measure, don't poo-poo the fact that I don't understand. What you have to do is realize that now you have doors open as well. Oh, you want the other thing to be resolved? Don't be a pig, right? It may not be resolved. It may get resolved in a negative way. Okay. But now that you have doors open, what, are you going to shut the doors now? You're not going to shut the doors. You're going to take advantage, right? But we are creatures of habit. We want to have a certain level of closure. I get it. I get it. I had certain things in my own life that, for the life of me, certainly going through it, painful, really, really painful, but in the end, it was clear as day, that this was meant to be, right? For a lot of different reasons, even though it was painful going through.
But the clarity came.
And I was deluded thinking, this is really what should have been, the missed opportunity, and you messed up this way, or something else happened. No, it wasn't meant to be. And there's very good reason why it wasn't meant to be. And now in hindsight, it didn't take me too long to see that, but now in hindsight, it makes perfect sense. Makes absolute perfect sense. Doesn't mean what I went through was easy, or what anybody goes through, right? That's not really the point, but sometimes after the fact, we're going to see that this makes the perfect sense. Okay, I may not understand exactly why, but it makes sense why this should not have gone the way I wanted to, because we get deluded. We see things the way we want to see things, not exactly the way they are. Now, it could be if we see things the way they are, then we wouldn't have made a mistake in the first place. But that's the way of the world. We live and we learn, and sometimes it's only by our own mistakes. Right? We may want something so bad, and God says, no, it's not good for you. But then, what happens? It gets lost in a way that, you get hurt by it, let's say. Right? So even in that case, God's still saying, I know this is best for you. But you don't see that. You're too busy dealing with the pain. Right? But then, sometime later, sometimes, we don't necessarily see the measure for measure, but now we understand. I was going in a different direction. That other person wasn't going in the same direction, and they would have brought you down. So God says, you know what? That's not the right person. That's totally not the right person. You went through a lot of pain to deal with it. Is that true? That's very true, right? But now when you realize the bigger picture, and you see it never could have been, and it never should have been in different ways, that makes up for it. But you have to be able to see that. Sometimes we don't see that. Sometimes we just don't. Sometimes we don't understand.
Some of us.
And a person has to realize time seems to heal all things, right? It seems to heal many things, usually. But but in the end, straight away, we're not necessarily going to see it's too raw. It's too, it's too painful. But at the end of the day, we want closure. We're not always given closure, right? We're not always given a reason why. And if a
Accepted. I can take that, Rabbi.
And if a person is put down and they feel bad and, whatever, and they have closure. So I would ask you, okay, now that you have closure, you feel better? You've been now slaughtered over here. A slow, agonizing death. And they, bam, right? A person gets hit very hard. You can say, well, at least I know the truth. Knowing the truth is not necessarily the best thing, right? It's extremely painful. Can be extremely painful. But again, what does a person want? A person wants some level of closure, and they think closure is going to make us feel better. Well, at least I know. At least I know for next time. Okay, I'm not going to say that's the worst.
Can we start winding it down here, Rabbi? We're about an hour later than we normally do because I have no Rabbi posting on this week, and I appreciate you going longer. I really do, but I need a bathroom break.
So the point is, whatever we go through, just wind down here, and say that, a person also has to realize God has an ultimate plan. And even if we're not privy to what that plan is, we have to believe God knows what's best for us, not what we think. So right. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I wrestle with that often, and I try to, what kind of adjustment needs to happen? What kind of, some crooked things seem like they can't be made straight, it seems sometimes. I don't know. I mean, I'm only human, and, I keep praying and leaning and learning and trying to find how to adjust just to make it work just right. But, it's almost like certain things are not, like you say, concealed from us. And there's not always answers. I think I heard that in the book of Job. We did a live class on the book of Job, and that's definitively the case. I mean, why bad things happen to good people? I mean, is a question that's been asked by many a great Jewish mind, and some of the best answers come out of Judaism on that question. But sometimes the answer
it's a common thing. It's a common thing that people have an issue with, and sometimes the answer is because we don't have any we don't have any we don't have any good answers.
So I got one last question, Rabbi.
We're not privy. Yeah, go ahead.
One last question.
I don't believe that, but go ahead.
The question is, are we done with 2-6?
Let me just check here. I think we are. We are done. That was part 17. There will be no part 18 on Mishnah 6 next week. We will tackle Mishnah 7.
All right, Baruch Hashem. This is
and next
great.
Next week we go back to normal time, 9 o'clock.
So we're going to go a half hour earlier, folks.
2 o'clock Eastern time, which will be half an hour earlier, back at our regular time.
All right, so that'll be 11 a.m. Pacific for those of you out here in the Pacific with myself, California, Oregon,
or anyone else, the prairies,
British Columbia. Anyways, so, okay, we're going to aim for a half hour early next week. Folks, just remember, you can always support or find Rabbi Chaim Coffman's information on his YouTube page or his website, orthodoxconversion.com. I just pray you continually consider supporting him in his ventures. I know he's moving into a big step in life with this new project, and we want him to have heavy wind in his sails for all the wonderful Torah he teaches us and shares with us. We just want him to be blessed as he makes steps into this. And I appreciate you sharing so much about 17-year, almost like a drought. Life is just one of those things. Sometimes you feel like you've been caught in a net and dragged, but Hashem knows what needs to happen in order to get you where you need to go. And it'd be nice if we had crystal clear answers, but that's not always the case.
Probably never the case.
Yeah. Well, Rabbi, thank you so much for today's lesson. So we're going to sign out till next week. We will be back a half hour early because the sun's starting to set a little earlier there in Israel, and we know that Rabbi sticks to Shabbat rules. And so we'll see you next week, folks. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Bye.